Nothing from the petitioner.
Okay, Ms. Chai?
I don't believe so, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Okay, I'll take that as a no. This, I'm going to give a quick summary, and I'm taking this from New Mexico Environment Department's response to the petition for alternative abatement standards. In the background section, I think Ms. Chai did a good job at summarizing what's going on here for the commission and for the public. She states that a dairy has operated on the east side of New Mexico Highway 528 in Bernalillo from 1960 through 1998. In 1986, the dairy applied for a discharge permit, and the Groundwater Quality Bureau approved and issued discharge permit number 437 in July 1987. Dairy operations ceased in 1998, and the property was cleared of all structures by 2006. The majority of the property has been sold and redeveloped into various lots that contain numerous commercial businesses. In connection with the closure of the dairy operations on the property, soil and groundwater samples were collected and revealed exceedances of groundwater quality standards and soil contamination on portions of the property at the time of the closure. In 2006, DP 437 was terminated. An investigation and remediation of the site has since proceeded under the Water Quality Control Commission's abatement regulations, which can be found at 20.6.2, 4,000 through 4,115 NMAC. These abatement actions have failed to achieve the standards, and monitoring wells in the Valley Fill Aquifer continue to show groundwater impacts by nitrate, chloride, and total dissolved solids. In April of 2016, D&G Price Limited Partnership submitted a petition for the AAS. AAS stands for Alternative Abatement Standards, that proposed setting standards at the property to 220 milligram per liter nitrate, 350 milligram per liter chloride, and 3,310 milligram per liter TDS, that's total dissolved solid. On October 14, 2016, this commission filed a 2016 order that set forth requirements for institutional controls to prohibit the use of the VFA as a potable water supply source. And VFA is the Valley Fill Aquifer. In January 2017, the department acknowledged completion of abatement for the VFA pursuant to 20.6.2.4112 NMAC. In May of 2022, the petitioner purchased Lot 5B and submitted plans for commercial development to the town of Bernalillo, which were rejected. The town of Bernalillo informed petitioner that the draft long-term comprehensive plan proposed a zoning change, limiting Lot 5B to high-density residential. The town of Bernalillo approved the comprehensive plan June 13, 2022. Given the non-residential purpose deed restriction, the adoption of the comprehensive plan designating Lot 5B as high-density residential has rendered the property undevelopable. In hopes that the commission will approve the modification of the non-residential purpose deed restriction, petitioner has prepared a plan for high-density residential development that will minimize surface water runoff, infiltration through engineered controls to mitigate potential adverse effects to the Valley Fill Aquifer beneath Lot 5B that may alter the approved alternative abatement standards for nitrate, chloride, and TDS concentrations. That concludes my summary taken from the New Mexico Environment Department's response to the petition, which is in favor of granting the variance. And I now return to the proceedings. Petitioner, you will have an opportunity to give a brief opening statement, and then call your first witness. Ms. Jones or Ms. Corral, I'm not sure who the host is right now, will be timing the witnesses to make sure they don't go over the maximum summary limit. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Domenici.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer, and good morning, Commissioners. The written statement read by the hearing officer greatly shortens my opening statement. The key points for this hearing are that when I was a kid, Price's Valley Gold was the main source of milk. They had a dairy in the South Valley, which is now the Valle del Oro Refuge. And they had a dairy at this location, which was at that time north of Albuquerque on the outskirts of sort of the community. As happens many times, dairies get absorbed or surrounded by the community and need to be redeveloped. Prices spent in a long period of time and lots of funds to take care of the environmental issues to allow redevelopment of their dairy. They ended up with one 7.4 acre parcel, which is where the low spot of the dairy was and where there was a lagoon that probably leaked. They made two significant efforts to address that particular groundwater and associated soil contamination. They did an injection remediation process, and then they actually pumped a volume of all of that water through the city of Rio Rancho wastewater treatment plant. They had previously agreed with NMED if those were unsuccessful, they would apply for this original alternative abatement standard. In that hearing, the future use of the property was not a significant issue or consideration. The then manager of the Price's partnership thought the zoning was commercial and non-residential, so that was included in the deed restriction. But the main focus on the deed restriction was prevention of any wells that would access groundwater in and under this 7.4 acres. So that is and has been and will be the heart of the deed restriction. The property was actually zoned for residential and commercial in 2016, but that was not understood, and therefore the non-residential limitation was put in the deed restriction. We came before the commission in December of 2021 and attempted to modify this deed restriction language by a motion that would essentially reopen the order and allow that modification. There was discussion by commissioners, commission counsel, and there was the focus was that there is not a process short of refiling and using the alternative abatement procedure to make this type of modification. So in light of that order, which indicates that I stated at the time, and I think counsel for the commission may also have, that absent a motion process, the only other available tool was to go through the abatement process itself. So we have done that. That requires heightened notice. We've actually noticed all the neighbors within a 1 mile radius. We've done newspaper and radio to meet the requirements. We published in the main Rio Rancho paper, the Albuquerque Journal, English and Spanish, sent out 2,500 letters, did radio advertising. We satisfied all of the notice requirements. There's been very limited public notice or response to this notice. Nothing that we're aware of any significance. There were some questions perhaps directed to NMED. I don't know if anyone signed up for public notice. I guess we'll see. But at the heart of it, this is we are in the alternative abatement standard process, which allows alternative abatements to be issued under specific circumstances. The specific circumstances, which include all of the geotechnical and hydrogeologic information, have not changed whatsoever. So we have not attempted to address those. The deed restriction will allow a multifamily residential facility. And as different from when we were in front of this commission slightly over a year ago, we have a full set of site plans, we have a full drainage plan, and we have a complete landscape plan. So we think after we show you that information that we respect it, that we think we will have satisfied what we think are the requirements that really apply out of the alternative abatement standard section. And that is section 20.6.2, 4103, 3C, which it states compliance with the proposed alternative abatement standard will not create a present or future hazard to public health or undue damage to property. The technical portions of the abatement remain in place. There is an abatement completion that we are not seeking to reopen. What the testimony will show is that 72% of this property will be paved or rooftop, so that's impervious. The remaining area will have drip irrigation with liner under it, so that will greatly reduce or eliminate any infiltration from the limited areas where there is not impervious features. The surface runoff will be managed under the regional stormwater plan and a site-specific drainage plan, and will go into the Venado Arroyo. So we will be able to show you actually much better than was available in 2016 as to how the surface water will be managed. And this development has been approved by the staff of Bernalillo County and needs to go through the final planning and council approvals. But if this change is approved by you and the plan is approved by the town of Bernalillo, we will have an enhanced surface water management situation. All of the water to the site will be provided by a municipal water supply. There will be no motivation, no reason, and no legal ability to drill any groundwater wells on this property. So we feel that the site will continue to be safe as it was in 2016, and more information regarding the management and certainty of that protection will be established by this development, which will actually utilize the site and establish a use on the site that's protective. So the authority for this request is 4103, which is the alternative abatement standards requirement. There is no specific standard allowing for modification of an alternative abatement standard. So we have utilized this conservative process, which allows for widespread public notice. And we're going to try to focus on the information we have that I've described and satisfy our burden of proof. NMED has agreed with our proposal, and they can speak for themselves, but it's very encouraging that they've agreed. They've been involved with this site for many, many years, long prior to 2016. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer.
So, Mr. Domenici, why don't we get all the witnesses sworn in by the court reporter, Ms. Johnson, at one time? Let's have all of them turn on their cameras, including Ms. Chai, your witness as well.
Yes, Mr. Hearing Officer.
So for the witnesses for the petitioner, one at a time, would you please state and spell your name?
Angela Williamson, Angela, Williamson, Williamson.
As everyone can hear, when there's more than one microphone unmuted, we get an echo. So unless you're going to speak, please keep your microphone muted. Thank you, Ms. Williamson. May I have the next petitioner's witness announce themselves?
My name is Jeremy Schell, Jeremy Shell.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Vincent Martinez, VINCENTMARTINEZ.
Okay, thank you. Next. Mr. Domenici, don't you have 5 witnesses?
Mr. Snyder?
My name is Jay Snyder, JAYSNYDER.
Okay. And Ms. Chai?
We have Matthew Smith.
Mr. Smith?
Matthew Smith, MATTHEWSMITH.
Okay, did I miss any witnesses for either party? Not hearing any. Ms.
We have
Johnson,
one-
would you
we have
swear
one.
them all in?
Yeah,
So
I will be entering the public notice. I am Sergio Reyes de Zul. That's Sergio SERGIO Reyes REYES -DZUL. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Can I get y'all to raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, did you get an affirmation from each of the 6 witnesses?
Would you like me to, can everybody do those again one at a time so that I can see who's speaking?
Please.
Yes,
This is
please.
Jeremy Shell. I do.
Thank you.
This is Angela Williamson. I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. You can
This is Sergio Reyes de Zul. I do.
This is Vincent Martinez. I do.
This is Matthew Smith. I do.
Thank you. Mr. Domenici, call your first witness.
I will call Vincent Martinez.
Please proceed.
Mr. Martinez, will you introduce yourself to the commission?
Good morning, commissioners and hearing us. My name is Vincent Martinez.
Do you adopt your testimony that that was provided in written form?
I do.
Can you tell the commission a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Again, my name is Vincent Martinez. My wife, Catherine, and I are the owners of the petition property, Lot 5B, Venata Plaza. We purchased this property with the intention of improving what was the special use zone property. The property is like Mr. Domenici stated, is a small portion of the former Price's Dairy, which is now commercial and residential subdivisions, the whole area anyway. The town of Bernalillo, with its 2022 adopted comprehensive plan, has designated this property as high high density residential. So that's what we thought we would develop towards here. So we put together a pretty outstanding team of architects, engineers, scientists, and specialists to develop a comprehensive plan to develop the area with a ecological and environmentally conscious solution in accordance with the New Mexico Water Quality Commission's standards, that as being our primary focus. But but my whole adult life I've been I've lived here in New Mexico. My family is from here. We got all my grandkids and all my kids are here, so we got probably quite a representation for this area.
In addition to developing this property, just briefly state what other business is your primary business?
My primary business, I'm a owner of a construction company here in New Mexico. We do civil construction, specialize in concrete. We do runways, taxiways, aprons, and highway work, all dealing with concrete.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I have nothing further.
Thank you.
Mr. Domenici, are you going to present your witnesses as a panel for cross-examination?
I'm planning to present my technical witnesses as a panel. But I can present, all five can be available. Yes, I'll do that.
It's the most efficient way, I think.
Yes.
So just keep presenting your witnesses, and when you're done, we will open the floor for cross-examination.
I'll call Mr. Sergio Reyes Zul.
I'm here.
Sir, will you introduce yourself to the commission, to the hearing officer and the commission?
Sure. I am Sergio Reyes de Zul. I work for EA Engineering and in support of helping with the public notice for Vital Holding with the Domenici team.
Do you adopt your direct testimony that was pre-filed as your testimony today?
That is correct.
Did you oversee newspaper publication for this hearing?
I did. I reached out to the Albuquerque Journal and the Rio Rancho Observer. They're actually run by the same management company to have the public notice run in English and Spanish.
And are affidavits of publication attached to your testimony?
Yes, we do have the affidavits of publication.
Did you arrange for a radio notification of this hearing?
That is correct. I reached out to KNW, who took care of the English and Spanish radio announcements for us, and we do have an affidavit of report for that.
Did you arrange for mailing notice for this hearing?
That is correct. DataPrint, local mailing service, took care of the bulk mailers for us, and they also provided an affidavit of 2,000 plus mailers that were sent out for the appropriate list that we got from the assessor's office. And then I actually personally took care of the interested party mailers and certified mailers for the public notice.
To the best of your knowledge, did you satisfy all of the requests from NMED regarding public notice?
That is correct. To my best knowledge, we completed this thoroughly and properly.
To the best of your knowledge, did you satisfy all of the regulatory requirements for public notice?
To the best of my knowledge, I have satisfied all the regulatory requirements for this public notice.
That's all I have. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
My next witness is Angela Williamson.
Good morning.
There's an echo on your mic. Let me see if it helps if I turn. Well, I have to keep mine on. So
Is that better?
there is an echo.
Give me a moment, please. Let me see.
Ms. Williamson, are you connected on another device somewhere?
No. Let's see.
You've been sworn in, so you're more than welcome to call in instead of using WebEx. There's phone numbers and codes so that you can call in. I don't think you'll have that problem, but we can't have the echo during your testimony. So Mr. Dominici, while she reconnects, are you able to call your next witness?
Yes, I'll call Jeremy Shell.
Good morning.
Will you introduce yourself to the hearing officer and the commissioners?
Of course. Good morning, Mr. Hearing Officer and Commissioners. My name is Jeremy Shell. I am a project manager and engineer with Respec Engineering.
Are you a registered engineer in the state of New Mexico?
Yes, I am.
And do you prepare drainage plans as part of your ordinary course of work?
Yes, I do.
Approximately how many drainage plans have you prepared that are similar to the plan you have prepared for this 7.4 acres?
I've prepared dozens for a variety of different developments, including residential single-family, multifamily apartments, as well as commercial developments.
Do you have can you put an exhibit up that shows your drainage plan for this 7.4 acres?
I can certainly try. It says that I cannot share unless I'm a co-host.
I'm making you the presenter now.
All right, let me try again. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Before we go to that, do you adopt your testimony that was pre-filed and submitted?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can you can you describe to the hearing officer and the commission what is shown briefly, what is shown on this conceptual drainage plan?
Sure. So what is shown, and if Angela had gone first, she would be able to describe the site plan in a lot more detail, which she will. But what you see here is our site plan. You'll see the buildings, the apartment buildings outlined, as well as our drive aisles and parking areas. That is overlaid on top of the existing survey. So there is existing infrastructure shown on this plan, including Venata Plaza, as you can see up here. And these faded lines that you see across the plan are topographic contours demonstrating the elevations across the site. So in the existing condition, the site slopes, generally speaking, from north to south. So runoff generated by the site in a rainfall event under the existing condition, sheet flows from north to south. If you can see my mouse, there is a small pond that collects the runoff from the site, and it's hard to see, so I will zoom in here if I can. There we go. Into a storm drain that you can see is stubbed out right here into the pond. So once water is collected by the pond, it enters into this storm drain and discharges into the Venata Arroyo. In the proposed condition, which is demonstrated here, the red arrows represent the proposed flow pattern for runoff generated by the site. So again, generally speaking, water will be routed in the internal drive aisles from north to south, which is the low point of the site. As demonstrated here and called out, we have 3 catch basins, which are essentially drainage inlets that allows water to enter into them and into this storm drain that is demonstrated by these red lines here. Once water is collected by these catch basins, runoff generated by the site in the proposed condition will be routed through the storm drain, through a stormwater quality manhole that is intended to treat the water and remove debris from the site runoff. And then after being routed through that stormwater quality manhole, it will ultimately discharge to the Venata Arroyo as it does in the existing condition.
And where the red lines, red arrows are shown, are those, is that concrete?
That is correct. The internal drive aisles and parking lot will be paved with concrete, which is where the water will be routed.
So the stormwater will be flowing on concrete until it reaches the storm drain connection?
That is correct.
or an underground pipes?
There are landscape areas around the site, but as far as where the water will be routed to that location is in the internal drive house.
That's all I have. That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Shell. Ms. Williamson? Oh, wait, I see a hand there.
Mr. Sanchez?
Thank you, Hearing Officer Kalen. Just one question, if I could, and it's just, I just want to orient myself. Is what we're looking at there, and it's now been removed from the share screen. But was that the entire lot 5B? Is that the entire lot there that we're looking at? What is it, 1.74 acres?
It's 7.4 acres, and I'll let Ms. Williamson answer that. She's gonna, she would have already said that, except she's out of order, but
Okay.
please.
Thank you. I apologize for my interruption. I just wanted to be clear where lot 5B was located in relation to the diagram. Thank you.
Great question. Angela, can you
Mr.
proceed?
Domenici, do you want to call back Ms. Williamson?
Ms. Williamson, can you introduce yourself to the commission? Hope we can hear you now. We're not able to hear you.
Mr. Domenici, why don't we take a 5-minute bathroom break and let Ms. Williamson fix the problem?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Okay, it is 10:22 right now. We'll come back on the record at 10:27.
Mr. Hearing Officer, can I get your
Yes.
Can I get your last name?
CHAKALIAN.
Thank you. Do you
And
need my,
Mr.
I was going to ask if you could email me the piece of literature that you were reading earlier. Can I put my email up on here, or?
If you navigate to the docketed matters webpage of the Environment Department, the document is there. So will you
Perfect.
go there and I'll tell you which document to look for?
Okay.
We still have, well, it's 10:27. Ms. Johnson, I'll
That's fine.
deal with that.
That's fine. You said that earlier. I'll see if I can find it.
Sounds good. And by the way, the hearing clerk, Pamela Jones, can also help you. Okay, Mr. Domenici, we're back on the record. It is 10:27 a.m. on the 10th of January, 2023, and you are calling Miss Williamson, whose echo is gone.
Ms. Williamson, please introduce yourself to the hearing officer and the commission.
Good morning, Mr. Hearing Officer and Commissioners. I do apologize for the technical difficulties. My name is Angela Williamson. I am the CEO and the principal at Modulus Architects and Land Use Planning. I lead the team working on behalf of Mr. Vincent Martinez to develop the subject property. In early 2020, we began work on an intended office warehouse project to be located on the subject site. However, in 2008, this parcel was zoned special use for a shopping center or a multifamily high-density development by the town of Bernalillo. This zoning designation required that I request a zone change to allow for the office warehouse project of approximately 80,000 square feet of construction. This proposed project was met with considerable opposition both from town residents and the town of Bernalillo, and was ultimately denied by the town council on February 22nd, 2021. Our team of planners, architects, and engineers made significant amendments to the proposed project that was previously denied, this time including project renderings, design standards, and a comprehensive list of prohibited uses that were previously identified as incompatible with the adjacent land uses. Ultimately, the amendments and redesigned project was still met with considerable opposition and denied for a second time on May 4th, 2022. During this time period, our client, Mr. Vincent Martinez, was nearing the expiration of his due diligence period on the purchase of this property. Considerable discussion was held, and it was decided that Mr. Martinez would shift this project from a commercial site, which had been denied twice by the town of Bernalillo, to a much more desired use of multifamily residential. Our team redesigned this site for a third time for a multifamily development. It was at this time, during the closing of our client's due diligence period, that it was brought to everyone's attention that there was a restriction on the deed that prevented residential uses. This posed a significant concern since the town of Bernalillo had made it very clear that commercial uses would not be compatible with their vision for this property. Moving forward, the only way to develop this property is with residential uses, which conflicts with the restriction that was placed on the property. We consulted with the original engineer that worked on the abatement plan, Mr. Jace Schneider, on the options for amending the restriction so that this property could be developed in accordance with its approved zoning. In the meantime, we continued moving forward with our efforts to design and entitle the property for a multifamily project by securing various approvals from the town of Bernalillo. The remaining approvals for our site plan, utilities, and plating actions are in progress and are supported by the town of Bernalillo with a recommendation of approval by the town planner, Ms. Stephanie Shumsky, in her recommendation to the Planning Commission issued November 2022. Once approved, water and utilities will be provided by the town of Bernalillo. Our intended project has been designed with considerable forethought into both its location and history. In particular, our hydrology experts and landscape architects designed and engineered plans that improve the current status of the undeveloped parcel while ensuring that measures have been included to prevent infiltration of the soil. Thank you for your time, and with that, I will stand for any questions that you may have regarding my testimony.
Mr. Domenici, do you want to call your next witness?
No, I'd like for this witness to put up the site plan.
Yes, sir. If you would allow me to share, please. Are you able to see my screen, Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
This is the proposed site plan that contains five structures.
Hold on, let me ask the questions. So you heard the question from Councilor Sanchez. Is the area on this site plan, is that the entire 7.4 acres of Lot 5B?
Yes, it is, Mr. Domenici.
Okay, and how many apartment units are going to be there?
We are proposing 192 apartment units at this location.
And how many buildings?
There are 4 apartment building structures and 1 community center structure, sir.
What percentage of the site is impervious?
Currently, in its current state of undeveloped land, there are 319,077 square feet of permeable surface, or dirt, if you will. Once developed, that will be reduced by 231,904 square feet for a difference of 72% of non-permeable surface.
And were you involved in designing the landscaping?
Yes, my team has a landscape architect that designed the landscaping for the subject site. There will be 87,173 square feet of landscaping planned for this site.
Do you have a rendering of what this site will look like?
I do. I will pull this up for the screen to share with. This is the proposed apartment homes at Venata Plaza that we have presented to the town of Bernalillo, and that I'm also presenting here for your review here.
And the vegetation at the bottom of that screen where the writing is that the type of vegetation that will be installed pursuant to the landscape plan?
That is correct. We are proposing very low water use with a drip irrigation system for a considerably less water required than a typical landscape plan would have.
And does the town of Bernalillo have the water available to service this project through its utility?
Yes, they do, Mr. Domenici.
And wastewater will also be handled through a wastewater system?
That is correct, through the town of Bernalillo.
And I think you may have mentioned this, but is this type of housing in demand in that geographic area?
Mr. Domenici is in great demand. That is why this project is being supported by the town of Bernalillo. They estimate that in the Albuquerque and MSA area, which includes the town of Bernalillo, that we are short a minimum of 13,000 units of housing. And this is one way to chip away at satisfying that.
And I don't think I asked you, so do you adopt your testimony that was presented in writing in your notice of intent?
Yes, I do.
That's all I have. Mr. Hearing Officer, I'll proceed to the next witness. Mr. Snyder, will you introduce yourself to the hearing officer and the commission?
Yes, my name is Jay Snyder. I am the office manager for EA Engineering here in Albuquerque.
Jay, sit a little closer to your mic, please.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, I am the office manager for EA Engineering in Albuquerque. I'm a professional engineer in New Mexico and a couple of other states. I'm a professional geologist in a number of states and a professional hydrogeologist. I've been doing site contaminated work for 30 plus years on a variety of sites and a number of dairy sites. I became involved in Price's Dairy back in around 2013 and have been providing, services as needed since.
Do you adopt your written testimony that's been submitted?
I do.
Can you briefly describe the alternative abatement standard that is in place, as well as the abatement completion from NMED?
Yes, the alternative standard was based on the data provided by a number of studies from the time Price's Dairy went into abatement until the petition for alternative standard in 2016, which included some methods for cleaning up the nitrate in place, as well as pumping and treating nitrate to a specified pour volume under an agreement with the NMED. And the basis for it is that the groundwater on the valley fill aquifer is purged. So it does not communicate with the regional water supply aquifer, which is found below it in the Santa Fe group. A number of hydrogeologic studies show that the groundwater flow direction in the valley fill aquifer varies seasonally, but basically it just oscillates back and forth and does not migrate from Lot 5B and from the valley fill aquifer. So the potential that the nitrate in the valley fill aquifer could spread to other areas is virtually non-existent. And so with that in mind, and with some institutional controls, we were able to put in place a plan that would be protective of public health and undue damage to property, even with an alternative standard that exceeded the WQCC standard.
Can you explain why the deed restriction language prohibiting non-residential was placed in the deed restriction in the original proceeding?
It was apparently a mistake after the hearing. In the original alternative abatement standard petition that I filed in April of 2016, there was no need for land use restrictions. Land use restrictions did not play into the strategy for protectiveness of human health or undue damage to property. And the deed restriction that prohibited a well in the valley fill aquifer that was all that was needed, irrespective of future land use, commercial or residential.
Do you have, are you able to put the deed restriction up on your screen?
I can, just a second. Can you see this?
Not yet. Thank you. Okay. So if you could scroll down on that.
It's right here in the third paragraph, Mr. Domenici.
So where it says shall be used only for non-residential purposes, that is the language we are asking to delete. Is that correct?
That is correct. The no wells or devices shall be installed on the property is appropriate and stands alone regardless of land use.
So if this modification is granted, there will still be a deed restriction with the prohibition on no wells or devices, or that indicates no wells or devices shall be installed on the property to use groundwater, and no use of the groundwater shall be allowed. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you briefly show, I think you have one plat showing the old Price's Dairy. Can you briefly show that just to show where this 7.4 acres sits?
Yes, let me see. Can you see that?
Yes.
So this is a composite of two aerial photographs that I took from Google Earth. One is circa 96, right before the dairy closed and started its abatement and corrective action activities. And then the bottom one, which I'll get to in a second, shows the 2022 status of the property. I have some markers on here just to place everybody because things have changed a lot since 1996. But Walmart, where Walmart is relative to the old dairy is marked on here. Dion's Pizza out on the frontage of 528 is here. And the center of lot 5B is marked. And you can see during dairy operations, and just like Mr. Shell testified to, the natural drainage is in a north to south direction. And so the water collection lagoons for the dairy were located between the feedlots and the Veneta Arroyo at the south end of the facility. And I've got a pin right at the center of lot 5B, which was a unlined surface impoundment, which leaked the nitrate contamination into the valley fill aquifer right underneath of it. So, the mechanism, the release mechanism for how the nitrate got into the valley fill aquifer is rather straightforward. Ponded water with no liner. Now we're looking at the 2022 layout of the property. And again, I still have the pins in here. You can see Walmart to the north, Dion's out on 528, and the center of lot 5B, which is the property that's in question now. And you can see the significant development that has occurred over the last 25 years in this area, including residential development to the residential development to the right of Lot 5B, to the south and southwest of Lot 5B, new development in there. And so this high-density residential development is appropriate in this area as it's currently being developed.
Have you reviewed the landscape plan and provided input into it for purposes of ensuring that if this deed restriction adjustment is made, that the site will be protective?
Yes, I did. Ms. Williamson and I had a conference call with the landscape architect, and I went over, what
Let me
we were trying to
let me
accomplish.
interrupt you. Can you put up the landscape plan?
Yes. Whoops, just a second.
Okay, please proceed when you're to discuss that.
So this is the landscape plan that was prepared, and the landscaping goals and the watering goals were, as Ms. Williamson testified to earlier, were to minimize water usage on the property. So the landscape plan is xeriscaped. Low water use plants are being used, and it's on drip irrigation, which is the most efficient means of irrigating, and the best way to meet the agronomic demand of the plants so that there's not excess water. In between the plants is a base course and gravel, a crusher fine base course and gravel over a filter fabric that will be sloped to shed surface water principally. There will be some infiltration, but again, it'll be a fraction of the current condition. And so between the hydrology plan, the community plan, which reduces the pervious surface area by 72%, and then the xeriscaping and the grading in the non-paved areas, this development will result in significantly less infiltration than the current condition or any commercial development where there may have been just some graveled areas, which would have allowed, a much larger surface area for infiltration.
Based on your history with the site, do you have an opinion whether if this deed restriction language is accepted, that the site will not create a present or future hazard to public health or undue damage to property?
Yes, that requirement in the alternative abatement standard rule is more than adequately being met with the original application and now with this change in deed restriction. The residential use is actually preferable to the commercial use. All the residents will be provided public water supply. The xeriscaping can be controlled and maintained with drip irrigation. Most of the surface is impervious and paved, and the surface water is controlled. There's no ponding of the surface water per se. It's discharged to the Veneta Arroyo, which eliminates that potential for infiltration. And so overall, removal of that language in the deeds restriction, which would allow this development, is beneficial to human health and the environment on several counts.
I'm not sure I asked if you adopted your direct testimony, so I'm going to repeat that. Do you adopt your direct testimony?
I do.
I have no further questions of of the petitioner's team of witnesses.
Okay. So first, I'm going to open cross-examination up to commission members. Commissioners are, can we stop sharing the screen for a moment? Thank you. Commissioners are able to direct their question to any particular witness or ask the question to the panel and let the panel answer it as they see fit. Do we have any commissioners? I see two commissioners on screen. Mr. Cipher, would you like to start?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. I was wondering where the design sends the roof drain water. That question goes to the panel, I guess.
Do I just speak up if I'm the one to answer that question?
You can raise your hand. Anyone can, at the bottom of the screen, there's a little, right next to the word share, there's a hand. If you want to take the question, just raise your hand and then proceed.
Okay, I'll take that question. Thank you, Commissioner Cipher. The roof drainage, Angela, maybe you can speak to exactly where that goes, but that may not be determined at this time, but inevitably it will be routed into the internal drive aisles as I described earlier. Well, Angela, I don't know if you want to speak to that as well, but ultimately it will be routed into the drive aisle and routed on the surface via the drive aisles as I described earlier.
Thank you, Jeremy. Angela Williamson here with Modulus Architects. To Jeremy's point, correct, we haven't got far enough in our drawings to determine the slope of the roof, but the design will be sloped so that it eventually reaches the surface and then will be captured with Jeremy's hydrology plan. That's how we plan on handling the roof drainage.
Great, so by pipe, but not across the surface of the pervious areas that crosses the landscaping, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brankard?
Thank you. I have no problems with this application. It looks fine. My only question relates to what exactly will be filed if we approve this application.
Can I answer that?
Well, Mr. Domenici, you're not under oath and you're not a witness. I'm not sure that the question can be answered by one of the witnesses at this time. Commissioner Brankard, maybe the department's witness can answer, but I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm assuming somebody's going to file an amended covenant document. Is that correct?
If I'm allowed a closing at the very end, I would address that at that time.
Okay, and specifically what I'm looking for is how would the language in that document differ from the language in the current restriction? Because the last time this came before the commission, there was a specific document that the commission had in front of it that it referenced in its order. I don't see a specific document in front of us at this point. So I just don't want to make another mistake.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Brankard. Mr. Domenici, you'll address that in your closing?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Are there any other questions from commissioners for this panel of witnesses? Mr. Dominguez?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. And just to follow up on Commissioner Brankard's prior question, I had a similar question as to whether there will be an amended deed restriction submitted. So, but with that said, we'll move on to other questions. I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Snyder. Good morning, Mr. Snyder. we meet again.
Good morning.
So, having been part of the prior hearing in 2016 on that, I have a couple of related questions. I want to go to page 2 of your direct testimony. Within the bottom paragraph on page 2, you indicate that land use restrictions were not part of the 2016 petition, and then go on to say it was added erroneously to the deed restriction with its filing after the hearing. Would you expand a little bit of what you mean there of it being added erroneously?
Yes, the deed restriction followed the hearing and the granting of the alternative abatement standard in 2016.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
So that the court reporter can accurately transcribe your words, please stay close to the microphone and please speak loudly.
Yes, I will. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So after the alternative abatement standard was granted following the 2016 petition, then we took actions to get an abatement completion report to the NMED based on the new standard. That followed the hearing, as well as plugging and abandoning the wells and some other administrative requirements. At the same time, we filed the institutional control with the Office of State Engineer to prohibit well drilling on Lot 5B, so that no permit could ever be pulled by a licensed driller to put a well on Lot 5B in the Valley Fill Aquifer. And then in parallel, the deed restriction was being prepared and filed. And I believe that may have been prepared by Price's real estate attorney, although I'm not positive on that. But there may have been this impression that the property was going to be commercial, and that language slipped into the deed restriction. However, that restriction was not part of the 2016 alternative abatement standard petition that I filed, nor was it necessary given the mechanisms we used to file the petition and be granted the alternative abatement standard.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. And to further explore your testimony there, I don't disagree with you that the land use was any type of a requirement. But if you recall, with the filings made in 2016, and I believe it was one of the appendices of your direct testimony, Appendix G of the 2016 petition, was a draft deed restriction. And within that draft deed restriction, the language was specific in there and was exactly the same as the deed that was filed in 2021, which specified that it would be non-residential purposes. And the reason I bring that up was, as part of the discussion and questioning during the 2016 hearing, we did have a discussion about residential versus commercial. My point being, I just wanted to be clear that the commission had before it in 2016 hearing a draft deed restriction that had the language of non-residential use. And I think the focus of the questioning was making sure that related to, the concern was of residential and the potential for any well drill. And so that was part of the 2016 hearing. As a follow-up question to your prior displays, if I understood you correctly, Lot 5B currently presides over the top of the unlined lagoon that was previously the source of the nitrate contamination. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And with that, you still have no concerns of infiltration issues related with Lot 5B, correct?
I do not. In fact, I think that the plan as presented improves the condition relative to where the property presently is, or to where it would have been with, you know, a large commercial lot or laydown area, depending on what it was going to be used for, equipment storage, material storage, etc.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Snyder. Mr. Hearing Officer, that's all the questions I have for this panel.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners before we turn to the public for cross-examination? Not hearing any. Are there any members of the public that wish to, Mr. Sanchez?
Thank you, Hearing Officer Caitlin. I wanted to clarify or actually follow up on a question Commissioner Dominguez asked if this would be the appropriate time, and the question would also be directed to Mr. Snyder.
What's the question, Mr. Sanchez?
Well, his testimony, as Commissioner Dominguez indicated, his testimony was that this didn't come up, the matter of the deed restriction didn't come up in the 2016 proceeding, and I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Commissioner Dominguez's question.
What's the question, sir?
Well, I'd need to reference his petition and the decision that was entered in the 2016 proceeding.
Okay, before you ask the question, do either counsel have an objection to counsel for the commission asking cross-examination questions?
No objection.
Mr. Sanchez, please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, perhaps more than a question, I just wanted to enter a couple of matters into the record. I'm looking at paragraph 4 of your petition, and it reads, this stipulation, in fact, it's not a stipulation, it's referring to the covenant or deed restriction, was not proposed in the April 2016 petition, was not considered by the New Mexico Water Quality Control Commission, and represents an oversight based on a misunderstanding of the zoning of Lot B at the time of the petition. Then I'd like to refer to what is attachment 1 to the petition. It is the decision and order granting alternative and abatement standards, which was entered on October 14th of 2016. And I would note that there was no appeal from this decision of the commission. And specifically, paragraph 23 at page 8 of that decision, and it reads, petitioner, which was the limited partnership at the time, has proposed, and this is a finding of fact made by Commissioner Dominguez at the time serving as hearing officer. Petitioner has proposed the following institutional and governmental controls to prevent the use of valley fill aquifer as a source of potable water in order to mitigate social costs to the proposed alternative abatement standard. And subparagraph says, petitioner will record a deed restriction in the Sandoval County real property records prohibiting construction of wells in the valley fill aquifer, and you've spoken to that. But there's a second element. the deed notice will provide owners, operators, I'm sorry, that it will provide, it says that it will have a restriction for non-residential use. So again, I think the record reflects that in fact it was considered by the commission in the 2016 proceeding and was a substantial finding made by the commission in its decision, which was not appealed. So I think that substantial finding stands. I just wanted to, and my apologies, Mr. Shakadan, for having characterized this as a question. I just thought it was important for the commission to know that that was of record. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who wish to cross-examine this panel of witnesses?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I have not received any message regarding public.
Thank you, Ms. Corral. Were there any members of the public who wanted to make a public comment?
Not at this moment either.
Thank you. Mr. Domenici, does that conclude your case in chief?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Uh,
Ms.
I-
Chai,
actually-
would you like to present?
Actually, may I? What I would like to propose as rebuttal, if you will, would consider it is I have a form of the deed restriction that I would like to propose as an exhibit and put that up as a rebuttal. I don't think I would need testimony to go with it. It would just be a document.
Okay, Mr. Domenici, is this in the administrative record already?
No, it isn't. Well, no, it was part of the prior hearing as indicated, but it was not, is not in this record.
Okay, before we accept that into evidence or consider it, why don't you send it to Ms. Chai and to Council Sanchez, and we will deal with it before we close the evidentiary hearing.
Lorraine, can you do that for me? See if she's there.
Yes, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hollingsworth. In the meantime, Ms. Chai, would you like to present your case in chief?
Mr. Hearing Officer, would you like me to cross-examine the petitioner's witnesses first, or would you like me to present our case in chief?
Okay, I would by all means like you to cross-examine the witnesses first.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. I'd like to cross-examine Mr. Jay Snyder.
Go ahead.
Okay. I have some follow-up questions based on your testimony and also some of the cross-examination by commission members. So this will be follow-up and clarification. Mr. Snyder, you did discuss the relationship between the Valley Fill Aquifer and the Upper Santa Fe Aquifer. And you talked about the how the water quality would not be adversely affected by this development. Please explain the difference in depth to water between the Valley Fill Aquifer and the Upper Santa Fe Aquifer.
The Valley Fill Aquifer is the first aquifer encountered on Lot 5B. And it's encountered at, I believe, around 35 or 40 feet below ground surface. And underlying it is a clay layer, which separates it from the Upper Santa Fe Group aquifer. The whole system is, even though that's a confining layer, which does not allow the Valley Fill Aquifer to discharge appreciably into the Upper Santa Fe Group aquifer, the water levels in the two are about the same because overall it's principally an unconfined aquifer system that close to the surface. But it's that clay layer that's protective and prevents the Valley Fill Aquifer groundwater from creating an issue in the regional water supply aquifer, which is the Santa Fe Group aquifer.
Is it true that the Valley Fill Aquifer is not a source aquifer?
It is not a source aquifer, and it would not be, it's highly unlikely that it would be produced as a drinking water source when, a few tens of feet deeper, you're in the better production aquifer of the Santa Fe group.
Okay, so just to seek clarification, you're saying that the upper Santa Fe aquifer is deeper than the valley fill aquifer.
It underlies it. It is below it and it is deeper.
Can you estimate how much deeper?
It's separated by the clay layer. So perhaps, 15, 20 feet.
Okay, thank you. You did mention in passing that, or you suggested that the development would rely on municipal water sources, and then you did mention the agreement with the Office of the State Engineer that there would be no wells drilled for this development. Could you just clarify with certainty that the only water that will be used for this development will be municipal water?
My understanding is that municipal water is a requirement in this development. I have not been working with the town of Bernalillo. Ms. Williamson would know, what the requirements are, but that public water supply is available and will be supplied, as well as sewage, will greatly improve the property relative to minimizing infiltration.
Thank you for that clarification. I will cross-examine Ms. Williamson as well. Before I do so, Mr. Schneider, could you please briefly describe, to the extent it has not been discussed already, how this development will comply with the 2016 final order?
With the 2016 order, the protectiveness of human health was served by, there were 3 points that were made at that time. One was that there would be a public water supply available and that it would be provided so that the valley fill aquifer is not a sole source of drinking water that people would have to use. Rather, public water would be supplied. The deed restriction that prohibits the drilling of a well into the valley fill aquifer was an element of the protectiveness. And the third point was the filing with the Office of State Engineers that prohibits a well being drilled and a permit being granted for a well being drilled on Lot 5B. So it's kind of like a three-pronged offense there that prevents any potential human exposure.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Mr. Hearing Officer, I have no further questions for Mr. Schneider.
Do you have any other cross-examination questions at all?
I do, for Ms. Williamson.
Okay.
Ms. Williamson, in follow-up to the question that I asked Mr. Schneider, please address whether for certainty you understand that the development will draw source exclusively from municipal water sources.
Thank you. Yes, Angela Williamson, I can confirm with certainty that this development will be using municipal water. That water budget has already been developed by the town of Bernalillo.
And are there any other clarifications that you can add to Mr. Schneider's testimony about how this development will comply with the 2016 order, to the extent it hasn't already been discussed?
Just to confirm what he's already stated, which is that this development will significantly improve the current status of the undeveloped land, reinforcing what that order is by more than 72%.
I also ask, in follow-up to another question posed, if the commission were to grant the petition at hand today, what follow-up would you do with the municipality to correct any errors in the deed restriction regarding non-residential use?
If I understand your question correctly, the follow-up with the municipality, which in this case would be the town of Bernalillo, is that what you're asking?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. The town of Bernalillo is aware that there is a deed restriction. They are deferring to this body here. They will support the decision that comes from this body today. If the deed restriction is in fact removed, they will proceed with their approvals for this project accordingly.
So I understand you to say that if this commission approves of the petitioner's request, then the town will ratify it with whatever procedures and documentation that they need to.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay. Are you finished with your cross-examination?
I am, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Okay. In fairness to Mr. Dominici, are there any redirect questions based on the cross-examination questions?
Yes, Mr. Hearing Officer. Ms. Williamson, what was this property zoned in 2016?
In 2016, this property was zoned SU, which stands for Special Use for a shopping center or multifamily high-density residential development.
And if Mr. Price, John Price, or anyone on behalf of Price's thought the property could not be used for residential at that time, would that have been a correct interpretation of the zoning?
Can you clarify the question? I guess.
So if Mr. Price thought that the property could be used exclusively for commercial use, would that have been an incorrect interpretation of the zoning?
That would have been an incorrect interpretation. Yes, sir.
Now, in 2016, given the zoning you described, would it have been possible, excuse me, for residential use to have included groundwater wells for residential purposes outside of this hearing process, but just under normal zoning?
No, there would not have been groundwater wells allowed or proposed for any sort of residential or commercial project.
And is that the case today?
That is the case today, yes.
And that is under local ordinance, no groundwater wells are allowed for residential. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's all I have as far as redirect.
Okay. Ms. Chai, would you like to present your only witness
Yes, please. I'd like to call Mr. Matthew Smith.
who's already under oath?
Mr. Smith, please state your name for the record.
My name is Matthew Smith.
Mr. Smith, do you adopt your pre-filed technical testimony as your testimony today?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you please briefly explain why the Bureau supports the petition today and how the proposed development might meet the requirements of the 2016 order to the extent that it's not unduly repetitive?
The Bureau has considered all relevant information submitted by the petitioner with respect to the Bureau's obligation to protect groundwater resources and public health. The Bureau has determined that development of this property will help minimize the infiltration potential and in turn aid in the preservation of the alternative abatement standards granted by the Commission by final order in October 2016 regarding the VFA. In addition, the engineered controls proposed by the petitioner to collect and divert stormwater runoff away from Lot 5B in accordance with the Southern Sandoval County Royal Flood Control Authority MS4 permit, which has oversight by the Department of Surface Water Quality Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm finished with my direct examination of this witness, and I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but he can stand for questions.
It is appropriate. Are there any cross-examination questions? First from Mr. Dominici?
Mr. Smith, when you say the Bureau supports this, are you talking about the Groundwater Quality Bureau?
I am talking about the Groundwater Quality Bureau.
Has this been addressed by people in the Groundwater Bureau that you report to above you?
It is reviewed by my supervisors, including Karen Minatre, who is my direct supervisor, and Justin Ball, who is the Bureau Chief of the Groundwater Quality Bureau.
They concur with the written filing and your testimony?
They do.
That's all I have.
Are there any cross-examination questions from commissioners? Mr. Dominguez?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. Mr. Smith, thank you for your testimony this morning. You were present to hear the testimony previously of Mr. Snyder, is that correct? And during my questioning of Mr. Snyder, you heard the dialogue regarding Lot 5B sitting on top of what was previously the unlined lagoon of the dairy, and that unlined lagoon was one of the sources of nitrate contamination. Did you hear that line of questioning?
Yes.
So does the department have any concerns regarding infiltration with the given plans that are proposed for Lot 5B?
No, as indicated in Mr. Snyder's testimony and Ms. Williamson's testimony, you're going to greatly reduce the surface water infiltration potential at the site, which in turn will help reduce the likelihood of altering site conditions that could essentially break the Commission's 2016 alternative abatement standards.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Hearing Officer, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners? Not hearing any. Are there any members of the public who wish to cross-examine this witness? Not hearing any. Ms. Chai, is there any redirect for this witness?
No, thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Does that conclude your case in chief?
It does.
Okay, let's deal with Mr. Domenici's rebuttal exhibit, so to speak. Have you received it?
I did receive it in the email and I have not taken the opportunity to read it yet. I can do that now.
Okay, Mr. Sanchez, you turned your camera on.
Yeah, I have a legal question for Mr. Domenici, but I'll wait till the appropriate time and perhaps you can let me know when that is. Thank you.
By all means.
I would like to ask Mr. Snyder a rebuttal question, excuse me.
Mr. Snyder, a rebuttal question. Okay, a rebuttal question for Mr. Snyder. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Snyder, from the hydrologic, geologic, and civil engineering standpoint, in 2016, did the language prohibiting domestic use make any difference with respect to the granting of the alternative standard, satisfying the conditions, and ensuring protective conditions into the future?
The commission granted the alternative standard based on everything that was presented. My technical application covered everything necessary to be protective of human health and to not cause undue harm. As I prepared the technical portion of it, and it did not consider land use nor the language of the deed restriction, simply the purpose of the deed restriction, that it would prohibit the drilling of any supply well on the property.
And other than a supply well, is there any way for exposure, any exposure pathway from the valley fill to human ingestion?
No, the depth to the valley fill aquifer is far below any construction related depths and any residential child soil ingestion related depths. And so it's not a complete pathway.
Thank you. And what I'd like to do, Mr. Hearing Officer, is put this proposed exhibit up and ask Ms. Williamson about it.
Which exhibit are we talking about?
This is the document that was emailed to Mr. Sanchez and Ms. Chai.
Okay,
It's
is it,
language of a
was it,
deed restriction.
was it marked?
No, it wasn't.
Okay. How will you mark it so that it's entered into evidence?
This would be Exhibit 4 to the testimony of Angela Williamson.
So you're not going to mark it as a rebuttal exhibit, you're going to just mark it as Exhibit 4?
I don't have a preference. I can mark it petitioner's rebuttal exhibit number 1. That's probably clearer.
It is clear. Okay, and Ms. Chai and Mr. Sanchez, I'm gonna wait. Well, not Mr. Sanchez, Ms. Chai, I'm gonna wait to see if you have any objections to this. But as for now, I think it's just a demonstrative exhibit. I'll just consider it demonstrative and we will proceed. But this is part of your rebuttal case, Mr. Domenici?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so please proceed.
Let me see if I can share the screen here. Let's see. I'm sorry.
There it is.
No, that's not it. Let me go back. Okay. Can you see a deed restriction on the screen?
No.
Okay. Bear with me.
While Mr. Domenici is trying to share his proper screen, Mr. Sanchez, would you give me an idea of what sort of a question you want to ask?
Certainly. I just have a question as to what authority under the Water Quality Act the commission has to remove a covenant of record that was part of the 2016 proceeding. My apologies. That was part of the 2016 proceeding. That was part of the decision entered by the commission, a decision which was not appealed. So I just don't know what authority the commission has under the Water Quality Act to remove a covenant that runs with the land and is binding on the successors to the current landowner, or that was binding on the successors. That's my concern.
Okay.
And my question.
So the way I'd like to handle that, Mr. Sanchez, is we will get a briefing from the parties. So if you could state your question in writing, I will present it at the end of this evidentiary hearing. It's not part of the evidence today, but what we'll do is we will factor that into the post-hearing process, and the parties can brief the issue to my satisfaction and then to your satisfaction. And I think that's the best way to proceed. Do you have another way that you would rather proceed?
Well, I don't know that I have an alternative way to proceed, but the agenda indicates that the commission may possibly deliberate and decide on the petition today. And if it's a jurisdictional question, if it's a question of whether the commission has authority to grant the relief that Mr. Domenici is requesting on behalf of his client, then I think that's a threshold question that would precede deliberation. Thank you.
Yes, and I would agree wholeheartedly. And that language in the agenda is may deliberate and decide, and obviously with your counsel, they would probably not. So, Mr. Domenici, you have a exhibit which we are going to call Petitioner's Rebuttal Exhibit 1. It's not marked. Why don't you please proceed? What is it, first of all?
This is what the deed would look like, as Mr. Brankert asked in the question. The only change in this would be the signatory would be Vitel Holdings LLC, which is the current property owner. But I think the rest of this would be, and this was presented with a motion, but this would make it extremely clear to a successor or anyone looking at the public record as to what the deed restriction is for this property. And it would also address the current deed restriction by indicating it as being corrective and replacing it. And so in addition to language correcting the prior deed, the only substantive change would be striking out the shall be used for non-residential purpose and, which is in the third whereas paragraph.
Okay, Mr. Domenici, I'm trying to create a clean evidentiary record for the commission to deliberate on in the future. And this seems to me to be a legal question. Commissioner Brankard, are you available?
Yes.
Would, Mr. Domenici, would you stop sharing your screen for a moment? Commissioner Brankard, it seems to me that the question was a legal question, and I wonder whether there was another way to handle this, your question, instead of doing it during the evidentiary hearing.
It seemed like my question is, what is the remedy here? And I mean, I think the remedy is clear. What they asked for is just that I think we need to see actual language, and that's what the petitioner has just presented.
Okay. Okay. So, Ms. Chai, do you have any objection? Have you had a chance to review petitioner's rebuttal exhibit 1?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I have had a chance to review petitioner's rebuttal exhibit 1, and I have no objection to it.
Okay, wonderful. So petitioner's rebuttal exhibit number 1 is admitted into evidence. Commissioner Brankard, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Ms. Chai, have you presented your case in chief?
I have.
Okay, great.
Mr. Hearing Officer.
Do you have a rebuttal case?
I do not have a rebuttal case, Mr. Hearing Officer.
All right. Then the evidentiary hearing is closed at this point. And Counsel Sanchez, let's discuss how you want to deal with your legal question.
Hearing Officer Galen, I don't know that it's my choice to decide that. I think it's a commission's prerogative. I will add to my question that, in my view, Mr. Domenici has indicated on the record that he believes that Mr. Price erroneously believed or entered that deed restriction in error. It seems to me that if it was a mistake of fact or law, then his remedy lies with a proceeding in the district court, which would have jurisdiction to correct a mistake of fact. So basically, it would be a petition in district court to correct a mistake of fact by the predecessor. I just don't think the authority has, or rather the commission has authority under the Water Quality Act to alter a deed of a covenant of record. Mr. Domenici is welcome to point to me where that authority would come from, but I don't see it. And the authority of the commission derives entirely from the provisions of the Water Quality Act. Thank you.
Mr. Domenici, before you respond, if you choose to respond, I wonder whether after you respond, whether the commission would like to discuss this legal question with their counsel and decide how to proceed. since the evidentiary record is closed at this point, and the evidentiary hearing is over, I need direction from the commission and Vice Chair Cipher on how he wants to proceed, either through some sort of deliberation and decision with counsel from Counsel Sanchez, or whether they want me to prepare a hearing officer report and deal with this legal question as part of the hearing officer's report and recommended decision. Vice Chair Cipher, how do you want to proceed?
I think for me, the information is pretty clear at this moment, but I do want to give opportunity for the rest of the commission to weigh in. But my recommendation at this point would be for you to complete your report, and then that more information is good. We then, however, the proper mechanism is to take this decision to the once we have the answer to the question in the April meeting may be a good idea. But with that, that's my recommendation. I'd like to let the rest of the commission weigh in. Yes, Mr. Dominguez.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. I concur with your point. I believe that to follow in the proper process of how we handle all hearings of this nature, the role of the hearing officer is still in play. And I think we need to allow the hearing officer to finish his role of providing feedback to the commission, whether it's through just a report or a report recommendation. But I think at this point in time, it would be premature for the commission to deliberate and make a decision. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any other commissioners that would like to weigh in on this? Absent any other input, I think we'll go forward with the recommended action. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Branker.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, I'll go along with the option to move this along the process with the hearing officer. Frankly, I don't see this as a terribly complicated matter. We're not being asked to approve new abatement standards. We're being asked to simply look at an order from 2016, which did not require this restriction, but it happened to reference a document that was attached to the petition, and that document which attached the petition included the language about non-residential use. So to clean things up, we really need to just simply issue an amendment to that 2016 order. But I will follow along with everyone else here who I think would like to hear from the hearing officer and go along with it.
Is there a major impacted ramification for waiting for a decision until April? I guess I should ask that before we move forward.
Yes, there
Chair
is.
Cipher, are you asking me, the hearing officer?
Yeah, I guess we can start there. Yes, please.
Okay. The rules. Let me turn to the rules, and I think that's probably the best place to start my answer. So let me take a look at 20.1.3 NMAC. And I'm going to the state archives, which is the only official version of the rule. And under 18, it talks about a variance hearing, but then you go on to general hearing procedures under 20.1.3.20. And Because there is a post-hearing procedure for abatement plan variance and compliance order hearing under 20.1.3.21. This rule was created by the Water Quality Control Commission. There are parts of this rule that are in my scheduling order, giving the parties 30 days after the filing of the notice of transcript. That's under section B. And then a recommended decision within 30 days from the previous deadline, and that's under C. So you will find the procedures here under 20.1.3.21 of that. Now, if you're asking if we can stretch this out a little bit, and of course, Council Sanchez would be a great resource to answer that question. But for my part, we are now mid-January. It'll take a week or so for Ms. Johnson to get us a verbatim transcript. Is that right?
I can have it to you by the end of the week, I think.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. So then we're looking at 30 days after that, be mid-February. Another 30 for me would be mid-March. Then we have 15-day comment period, another 7 days for my final. So we are looking at having this final report and recommended decision right before the April, I think it's April 10, if I'm not mistaken. I'm guessing here, the April meeting of the WQCC. So that should be right on time for the next meeting. However, that wouldn't answer Council Sanchez's legal question. We can try to weave that in somehow into the post-hearing procedure, but that wouldn't answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. Councilor Sanchez, would this same time frame work well to have an answer to your question that the commission could then properly deliberate and finalize their response?
Yes, Vice Chair Schleifer, I think so. And I think there was an indication that in his recommendation, the hearing officer Chakaden could address the legal question as well. So that would certainly posture it correctly and in time for the commission to deliberate and decide at its April meeting.
So going forward with that as our preferred action, do we need to make a motion, or do we just conclude this issue for now and move forward with that understanding?
I think it'd be preferable if it was put in the form of a motion that the hearing officer will submit a report and recommendation, and then he can go ahead and perhaps an amended scheduling order, if it doesn't address it already, set out the time for the comment responses and comments.
Good.
So that would, if you could do that in the form of motion, that'd be preferable.
Thank you, Councilor. Do we have a commission member that would like to tackle that motion? Well, Councilor Brackard, would you like to try to do that one?
Well, I hesitate because I don't exactly agree with the process here.
Okay.
While the hearing officer is correct that there are rules governing post-hearing procedures, all those rules start with the phrase, unless otherwise ordered by the commission.
Okay.
So in other words, we don't have to follow that process.
Okay.
But I think what we're looking at then does the hearing officer want proposed findings from the parties, or do you want to go straight to a proposed order?
Thank you, Commissioner Brankard. My scheduling order did anticipate that the commission would order me to provide a report and recommended decision, and to aid me in that, I do want proposed findings and conclusions from the parties. And I did not anticipate a legal question to arise during this hearing, and so I would have to address that before we close this matter. But yes, I do want proposed findings and conclusions.
And is that are those deadlines currently in your procedural order?
They all are, including the comment period and the 7 days after the comment period for me to revise my proposed report and and recommended decision into a final version.
All right, so I guess I can make a motion for the process to follow what is set forth currently in the procedural order from the hearing officer, with the addition that the proposed findings and conclusions of the party address Council Sanchez's question about the authority of the commission to issue the relief that has been requested here.
Thank you, Commissioner Brankard.
Second the motion, Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you, Commissioner Dominguez. We have a first and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, Pamela, could you provide roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Brankard, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Commissioner Candelaria?
Yes.
Commissioner Chacon?
Yes.
Commissioner Fry?
Yes.
Commissioner McWilliams?
Yes.
Commissioner Patton? Sorry, Commissioner, I didn't hear you. Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Velasquez?
Yes.
Commissioner Vihil?
Yes.
Commissioner Zemlik?
Yes.
Let me ask again, Commissioner Patton, your vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Vice Chair Cipher?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Vice Chair Cipher, just for the record, so it's clean, I believe the administrator may have jumped past my name.
I apologize, Commissioner Dominguez. Your vote on this matter?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Pam.
Vice Chair, if it pleases the commission, it would be helpful for me in my report and recommended decision to encompass the legal question that Council Sanchez has brought up, to have Council Sanchez email the parties and myself and the hearing clerk with the exact question in writing. And then I would instruct the parties to use their post-hearing submissions to incorporate a closing argument that deals with the legal question, and to include the legal conclusion in that part of the post-hearing submission, the proposed legal conclusion to that question. Council Sanchez, does that seem fair to you?
Hearing Officer Kalen, I would be more than glad to do that. I will draft up the issue or the question submitted to all council of record and to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sanchez. Thank
Mr.
you.
Domenici?
I object to that. I object to that process. I think the commission should look at that question. I've seen questions from other commission council and this one that I think go far beyond what the commission may actually want to request. And so I would prefer that question come from the commission So people like Mr. Brankard have a chance to weigh in on it, then come directly to me, and perhaps it be different than what we expect based on what has been discussed in this public hearing.
Mr. Sanchez?
I don't really care either way. I can certainly represent to Council Domenici that I would not draft a question that goes beyond what I've represented in on the record today. I'd be welcome to. Well, I'm not sure how we would do this. My concern is that I'd be glad to have council, specifically Mr. Domenici, review my question, but how that then finds its way into the proposed findings and decisions or closing arguments is a logistical problem, it seems. So it's a question of, I have no problem with what Mr. Domenici is proposing, but I'm wondering how we do that sequentially or chronologically in relation to the other deadlines.
I think it should be done right now, just like the other motion. There should be another motion to send a letter, and the content should be raised in front of the commission and accepted. And I think it would take a very short amount of time. Mr. Sanchez, I think, knows what he wants, and he could paraphrase that and or quote it. And then we would know exactly what we're expecting to be responding to today.
Let me do that then. The issue or question is very simple. What authority does the commission have under the provisions of the Water Quality Act to remove a covenant or deed restriction of record filed with the Sandoval County Clerk's Office? That's it.
And with that clarification, I withdraw my objection, and we'll just proceed with that understanding about what's on the record.
So, Mr. Domenici, you're not then asking for the commission to make a motion then?
No.
Okay, and Ms. Court Reporter, you have that question transcribed verbatim, do you not? Fantastic. So, Council Sanchez, I think we have your question in writing from the court reporter. Do you agree?
I agree.
Okay, fantastic. So then I'm going to instruct the parties to make sure to address that legal question in your closing argument, in your proposed findings and conclusions, and I will deal with it in my report, which you will see in about 60 days. That concludes this matter, the public hearing in the variance petition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Are you done with your court reporter, or should she stay?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
Ms. Jones, do you want to take over the agenda?
I believe Vice Chair Cipher will do that.
Okay, I'm here. I've been talking away. I don't know how long I've been muted, but I appreciate the work everybody has performed on this one. I don't know, generally, this is 11:52. We have it estimated about an hour left on our agenda. What's everybody's preference? Do we want to push through, or did you want to take a lunch break? If nobody speaks up, I'll just make a decision.
I'll speak out. Commissioner Velasquez, I'd like to push through.
Okay. With that said, let's push through. Item 9 on the agenda is the matter of petition for review of the decision of the New Mexico Environment Department issuing groundwater discharge permit number DP 1132. Motion by petitioners concerned citizens for nuclear safety and Honor Our Pueblo existence to vacate orders issued under disqualification. Mr. Sanchez, Councilor Sanchez, could you please ask us, or rather advise us on how to proceed on this topic?
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. Usually the process is to allow the movant to speak to his motion and then allow the other parties to do likewise. And then the matter can come before the commission for questions. Or if it's the commission's preference, they can ask the questions of council as their respective presentations are made. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lovejoy, how much time do you foresee needing?
Oh, I would say about 10 or 12 minutes.
Okay, go for that. That's good. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Cipher. I'm Lindsay Lovejoy. I represent Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety and Honor Our Pueblo Existence. I've worked on this matter for nearly a decade, advocating regulation of the radioactive liquid waste treatment facility at the lab under the hazardous waste laws. We've made a motion to vacate decisions made by the commission when its chair was disqualified by a conflicting interest. I'll summarize our position. I'm going to talk about three things. First, when is a decision maker, a judge or an agency official, disqualified? Second, what relief is called for when a decision maker is disqualified? And third, what relief is specifically called for here where DOE and NSA has repeatedly violated due process? First of all, the United States Supreme Court has ruled that for a decision maker to make rulings that could affect his or her personal interests denies due process of law. This rule goes back nearly 100 years to cases like Toomey v. Ohio. It is not a question of New Mexico law. It's a question of the federal Constitution. It applies to all courts and all agencies in all states. Notice, please, that this is an objective rule. It does not depend on proof that the judge expressed favoritism or dislike for a party or did something unfair. If the judge has a personal interest in the case, he or she cannot rule on it. For example, a judge who works for one of the parties or is trying to get a job with a party has a personal interest in a case. Obviously, a judge could benefit personally by favoring the prospective employer. The Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit stated in the Al-Nashiri case, which is cited in our briefs, quote, "It is beyond question that judges may not adjudicate cases involving their prospective employers," unquote. Stephanie Stringer broke that rule. It's clear that she was disqualified from the first discussions she had of a job with DOE and NSA. That's really the whole motion here. The other parties have objected that in addition to Ms. Stringer, there were 14 other commissioners voting on the orders in this case. That's true, but the U.S. Supreme Court has held in Pennsylvania v. Williams that disqualification of a single judge on a panel requires that a panel decision be vacated. Now, in addition, although we are not required to show this, Ms. Stringer was much more than just one of 14 members. She was the Environment Department designated member, the commission chair, and the commission hearing officer with full powers to run the hearings. She made the agendas, called out the motions, expressed her own position, and asked the commission members to agree. She had the yes votes every time. Then she drafted the commission's order, and she signed it for the commission. She was clearly in control. This appeal was filed on June 6, 2022. We'd asked for a remand to NMED because the secretary had failed to, quote, respond to all significant comments, unquote, as the rules require. Triad and DOE and NSA opposed a remand. In this situation, Chair Stringer submitted a job application to DOE and NSA on August 7. Of course, this was secret. 2 days later, at the August 9, 2022 commission hearing, Chair Stringer stated flatly that there was no basis for a remand to NMED. She did not even call for a vote. Triad and DOE and NSA had moved to stay proceedings to await a ruling from the EPA Appeals Board considering a federal permit. Chair Stringer stated on the record, quote, "It is important to know the determination that is made by the EAB," unquote. A motion for a stay passed. From that day, this appeal has been frozen. On August 23rd, Chair Stringer met with DOE and NSA secretly. On August 30, she signed the commission order staying all proceedings. 1 day later, on August 31, DOE and NSA offered Chair Stringer a salaried position, again, secretly. After that, we moved to reverse the permit, arguing that since the lab has admitted that the facility manages hazardous waste, the Water Quality Act permit is prohibited by that act. At the September 13 hearing, before the commission, one member moved to deny our motion based on the stay of proceedings. Chair Stringer seconded the motion, and it passed. After that, we moved to vacate the stay. The commission refused, maintaining the stay in effect. The argument is made here that the commission's orders were correct. It doesn't matter legally if the orders were correct. In one of the saddest decisions emerging from the federal courts, the Second Circuit dealt with a defense raised by Martin Manton, a judge of that court, who took money for his decisions. Manton argued that the decisions were made by a panel of 3 and that the result in each case had been correct, so there's no harm done. Mr. Justice Sutherland said, I'll quote, "Judicial action, whether just or unjust, right or wrong, is not for sale. And if the rule should ever be accepted that the correctness of judicial action taken for a price removes the stain of corruption and exonerates the judge, the event will mark the first step towards the abandonment of that imperative requisite of even-handed justice proclaimed by Chief Justice Marshall more than a century ago, that the judge must be perfectly and completely independent with nothing to influence or control him, but God and his conscience," unquote. Anyway, the rulings were not correct. The commission has to consider an appeal within 90 days of filing, a deadline that's long passed. As for the stay, we recently got the EPA board's ruling. As we expected and predicted, it doesn't say anything about the Water Quality Act, so there is no good reason to stay this case. And a Water Quality Act permit for a facility that handles hazardous waste is prohibited by the Act. The Commission has not addressed these issues because of the stay. So the permit now remains in effect. Review by the Commission is frozen, and we can't appeal to the Court of Appeals until the Commission rules on our appeal, which is stay. We learned on October 31 that Ms. Stringer had taken a salaried position with DOE and NSA. It is a shameful story. We can't close our eyes to this. Second point, the cases hold that any rulings in which she participated and orders based on them must be vacated. The court in the al-Nashiri case said, quote, scrubbed from the record, unquote. We request that relief. And third, this is the second time in this case that DOE and NSA has hired away a decision maker from NMED. In 2018, DOE and NSA secretly hired the NMED hearing officer, Aaron Anderson. We had to move the commission to vacate Anderson's decision, which it did ultimately. This case has cost us a lot, and we still haven't reached the merits. Twice, DOE and NSA has corrupted the proceeding, rendering the whole process a futility. We've had to go back and repeat stages. As a reasonable sanction under 20.1.3.10b2 NMEC, we request that the Commission direct DOE and NSA to pay the costs and expenses incurred by CCNS, HOPE, and the other parties in litigating the stages that have to be repeated. That's all I have.
Mr. Vice
Mr.
Chair.
Vice Chair, this is Commissioner Patton. I think you have been muted for a while.
Did it again. You'd think I'd learn after a while. I thought that I would offer a few bits of information, my thoughts, and then Councilor Sanchez, if you want to kind of give us some counsel on where to go next, perhaps it would be to let the opposing point of view be spoken. But then this really wasn't, I don't really know what kind of process we should be following at this point. But let me just say that the stay that was imposed is effectively over, because it was to be when the EAB made their decision, which was done on December 28th. So the effectiveness is that the stay is over. Can we not now set up for a hearing? Councilor Sanchez, go ahead.
Mr. Cipher, in all fairness to the parties, I think before we have a discussion among the commission regarding how to next proceed, the rest of the council for the rest of the party should first be heard. Thank you.
Okay. And then that would be represented by Councilor Weschler, is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor. I'll be speaking on behalf of the permittees, and if I may.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the commission. Jeff Wexler on behalf of the Triad. With me is our Maxine McReynolds and Christopher Stoneback from the Office of the General Counsel. And as I said, I'll speak on behalf of the permittees. And I want to start with a comment on the nature of the motion. Ms. Stringer was a public servant who I understand served the Environment Department for almost 20 years. While we may not have always agreed with Ms. Stringer's decisions, it should not be doubted that she served with integrity. Mr. Lovejoy's insinuations that Ms. Stringer's actions were secret, improper, or unethical without any evidence are unfortunate and unfair. I frankly believe that Ms. Stringer and the commission deserve more. Turning to the standard, CCNS relies heavily on a prohibition era case from a different jurisdiction that does not strictly apply. That case, which you heard Mr. Lovejoy identify today, Toomey versus Ohio, involved the judge that only received compensation if he convicted the defendant. So let me repeat that. There was a judge and he received compensation if he convicted the defendant. If the defendant was found not guilty, the judge received no compensation. So under those circumstances, the court, maybe it's obvious, said that the judge had a direct financial interest in the outcome of the case. That and all of the other cases Mr. Lovejoy is citing are a far cry from the facts before us on CCNS's motion, where there's no evidence whatsoever that Ms. Stringer had any interest at all, financial or otherwise, in the outcome of the case. More importantly, CCNS ignores the actual applicable standard, which CCNS calls in its brief, quote, ultimately irrelevant in paragraph 30 of its reply. And really, this motion, given the facts, fails under any standard. But I'm going to talk this morning about the applicable standards. So to start with, the Water Quality Act. And the courts have held that there is, quote, a presumption of honesty and integrity, end quote, for those serving as commissioners. And it's therefore CCNS's burden to overcome this presumption. And it has to do so with more than innuendos and suggestion. As we outlined in our brief, the Water Quality Act speaks directly to the issue presented and what constitutes a conflict of interest for a commissioner. As relevant here, it says that, quote, a member of the commission shall not participate in the consideration of appeal if the subject of the appeal is an application filed or a permit held by an entity that either employs the commission member or from which the commission member received more than 10% of the member's gross personal income in either of the proceedings in the previous 2 years. Neither of those conditions apply. Now, turning to the judicial treatment of this issue, and Mr. Lovejoy suggests, well, the United States Constitution applies to all of the states, and that is, of course, true. But the New Mexico precedent is, in fact, interpreting the 14th Amendment. In other words, the New Mexico courts, which are directly applicable and looking at the Water Quality Act, are interpreting the United States Constitution and its requirement. And the courts say that to satisfy its burden and show a conflict of interest requiring disqualification, CCNS has to produce actual evidence of bias or prejudgment. And that evidence must be, quote, strong enough to warrant disqualification and overcome that, as I said, presumption of honesty and integrity. Now, you heard this morning, Mr. Lovejoy, talk about the facts in lots of other cases, including ones where there was direct bribery and the like. And what you didn't hear Mr. Lovejoy talk about was the evidence in this case. And that's because CCNS offers no evidence of bias or prejudgment whatsoever. They offer no statement, no document, no expressed opinion from Ms. Stringer about this case. Insinuation is not enough. It's not. The courts have made that very clear. This motion must be denied. Now, turning to the practical considerations, as both the department and the permittees explained in our briefing, the commission acts as a body. Each of the 3 orders that involved Ms. Stringer had wide support. There's simply no indication that the result would have been different, even in the absence of Ms. Stringer. And maybe more practically speaking, there's no substantive matters that have been cited in this case at all. The 3 impacted orders are purely procedural. Granting the motion would only have the impact of creating confusion, and it would be incredibly inefficient because it would require the commission to simply start over from the very beginning, doing everything from accepting the petition, appointing a hearing officer. None of that matters because we haven't had any substantive orders. There'd be no benefit from granting this motion to any party. Now, for those reasons, we recommend a 2-part decision here. First of all, it's clear the commission should deny the motion. Second of all, out of an abundance of caution, we suggest that the commission also expressly ratify and adopt the previous orders. That will prevent any future questions from the petitioners, as we've seen they're very persistent, and no further mischief can come of this particular issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wexler. So Councilor Sanchez, how do you suggest we proceed from here? You're muted, sir.
Vice Chair Cipher, I believe NMED has entered an appearance as well. And if I'm correct, then they should be heard also.
Okay, wonderful. Following that, I'll open it up to the commission if they have any opinions, and then Councilor Sanchez, take it back to you for your recommended action.
Mr. Hearing Officer, members of the commission, I believe Mr. Wexler did present in oral form many of the arguments that NMED presented in written form in the New Mexico Environment Department's response to motion to vacate orders issued under disqualification. We agree that the legal standard that's applicable here has not been met by CCNS. They have not met their burden of proof, and that the orders were duly granted by the WCC as a whole. One of the orders was ratified. We agree that the commission could ratify the other two orders as well. In the interest of brevity, I will not repeat the arguments that Mr. Wexler made. And I stand for questions if anyone would like to ask any questions regarding the pleading that we submitted in this case.
Thank you, Councilor Chai. I guess what I'd like to do is open it up to the commission members. Is there any questions you have for any of the three? And then absent any questions, we'll go to Councilor Sanchez and ask for his advice. Hearing no questions from the commission, Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. I think would be usurping the authority of the commission to recommend a decision for them to make. I think they've heard the arguments of counsel. And I have to say that Mr. Lovejoy's concern is legitimate in terms of having this matter heard on its merits. And I respect that. And I think the whole thing is further exacerbated by the language of the order staying the proceeding. And if I can refer to that, it's the order that was entered on August the 30th. And it's the order on motion to stay proceedings pending resolution of related adjudication. I think as a preface to that, if you look at the findings that the commission entered as part of its order, it talks about essentially that the grant of stay will avoid the possibility of inconsistent decisions in the commission, the APA proceeding, that the final decision of the APA's appeal tribunal will serve to inform the commission's proceeding, and it'll the grant of stay will promote administrative economy and avoid duplicative administrative proceedings and related costs. So really the operative language here perhaps is the language that says pending resolution of the related adjudicatory proceeding. Well, looking at the holding of the three environmental appeals judges in appeal number 2201, and it reads, the board remands the permit to the region to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on the outfall 051-2021 discharge data. That's data pertaining to the discharge of from the Llano radioactive waste treatment facility through outfall 51 to Mortan Canyon, to consider any comments received and to revise its response to comments to comment documents and take further action as appropriate in reissuing the permit decision. So what we have here is we don't have a resolution of the related adjudicatory proceeding. It's going to further delay the matter. So we have, I think the commission has perhaps not competing interests, but you have I don't know how long it's going to take for that whole comment period to be completed, for there to basically for the remand to go back up to, if it does, to the EAB board, to the board, and then is there going to be an appeal from that? So what I'm suggesting is we don't have any real sense of how long this proceeding may be stayed, the proceeding before the commission. On the other hand, Mr. Wexler is correct that there are sufficient grounds for the commission to deny the motion, and also as a remedy for the commission to ratify all its previous orders. I think it's done that in part already, because in substance, the order of stay was ratified at a subsequent commission meeting at which Mrs. Stringer was absent. She was no longer on the commission, in fact. But as a matter of caution, I think the commission could deny the motion and affirm or ratify all its previous orders. But again, it's not for me to say. That's the prerogative of the commission.
I appreciate that, Counselor. However, tell me, isn't this day effectively over with the decision being made on the 28th of December?
Not if you look at pending resolution of the remand is not a resolution, Vice Chair Cipher.
Okay, so it's your opinion that the stay would still be effective as there has not been any resolution?
That is certainly the language of the order entered by the commission. And I pointed out the findings, the related findings, because that gives the commission, I think, looking back now, the reasons it issued the stay. Those were the bases, if you will, for the order of stay. And we don't have, those findings have not been manifested by the remand.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. Just a couple of points. I think the decision we got out of the EPA EAB shows that they're on track to investigate the process of comment and response and explanation undergone by EPA Region 6. And this may go on a while, but I think the main thing is it's not going to help decide the case before the commission. That case in Washington depends on the nature of the interchange between the EPA region and the public. Our case depends on other factors, and most important, the exclusion from the Water Quality Act of activities that are subject to the hazardous waste laws. That's not relevant in Washington, it's relevant here. I don't think continuing the stay is going to offer any help at all to this commission.
Thank you, Mr. Lovejoy.
And if I may say one further thing. Until this state secedes from the Union, it will be bound by the 14th Amendment. That amendment, as the courts interpret it, in, for example, the Al-Nashiri case, where a judge was trying to get a job with one of the parties. The court said very clearly, to begin with, it is beyond question that judges may not adjudicate cases involving their prospective employers, which is what Stephanie Stringer did. And the case says likewise, after the initiation of any discussions with a potential employer, no matter how preliminary or tentative the exploration may be, the judge must recuse. And
Mr. Lovejoy, Mr. Lovejoy, let me interrupt you right now. We're still trying to gather. Well, as kind of the new guy on the block, is trying to gather what direction to go for now. For now, I think we've heard and understood what you had to say. For now, we may give you some more time later, but let me gather my feet underneath me first, and we'll see if we return to your arguments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Blanker, did you, your face has appeared. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I do, and I see that Commissioner Dominguez does too. So let me just, there seem to be two separate issues here. One is CCNS et al.'s motion to vacate 3 prior orders of the commission. The second issue is what do we do about the stay now that there's an order issued by the Environmental Appeals Board? I think regardless of what happened with the Environmental Appeals Board, we still have to deal with this motion filed by CCNS. Okay. My feeling is we could have a really great, lengthy discussion about all the legal issues involved with this motion. And I'd love to dive into it. This is an area that I love, talking about bias of commission members, etc. But I would propose a practical solution, which is that we simply go back and however we want to do it, whether ratify or revote on these 3 prior orders, just to clean the record. I think that CCNS is correct, that this is a serious issue that they have raised. I am deeply disappointed that all the esteemed counsel have not cited the New Mexico Supreme Court that is directly on point decision regarding future employment of someone involved in the proceeding. U.S. West versus Corporation Commission, a 1999 decision. In that case, the court was greatly concerned about such an action. So I think it would be in all of our best interest if we simply had a revote on the 3 orders that were prior done. And then when that's over, if we're still all around here, we can discuss what to do about the EAB order.
Okay, thank you. I think those are great suggestions. Commissioner Dominguez.
Couple of different things to address up front. First thing I want to address is, this is strictly a motion before the commission. We've heard from all 3 parties. As typical for motions, once we've heard from parties, I don't think there's a place for rebuttal testimony from all 3 parties. They've all had their opportunity. And so I think at this point in time, we're to commission questions and or deliberation. So I want to throw that out there to begin with. Secondly, to the issue at hand, agenda item 9 is very specific. It's a specific motion. And this may then go to a question for council, given Commissioner Brankert's point that he brought up about ratifying prior decisions. As far as the motion is laid out there, and Commission Council can provide us guidance, but the way that I'm seeing that is the only thing before the commission today is to deal with this motion. Now, the part of the parties have provided an alternative option, which Commissioner Branker alluded to, of ratifying the prior orders that are of question. And I guess the question then I have for council is twofold. Can the commission today only deal with the agenda item that's listed? And if the commission chose the path of ratifying addition or the prior orders, would that need to be done at a later date where they are listed as an agenda item? Even though it's sort of dovetailed into the issue at hand. So possibly Council Sanchez can provide us some guidance as far as options for the commission today.
If I may, Vice Chair Cipher.
Please.
Commissioner Dominguez, I think it would be appropriate for the commission, if it so desires, to deny the motion and ratify the 3 previous orders today.
I think, Councilor Sanchez, as I've listened to this input, I really think that is exactly what needs to be done. We need to act on the matters of item 9 on our agenda today. And if that means ratifying the past orders and denying the motion, is that the correct language? Is that what you just said, Robert?
That's correct, Vice Chair Cipher.
Yes. I think that's exactly what the action before us is, and I would entertain a motion to do so if that's everyone else's understanding. Commissioner Thompson?
Yes, I would make a motion that we deny the petition and we reaffirm our previous actions that have been taken previously with respect to this request.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second the motion is Commissioner Dominguez.
Yeah, yes, Commissioner Dominguez, I believe Commissioner Patton had already given us a second.
Okay, very well. My audio didn't pick that up.
Okay.
Mr. Vice Chair, this is Commissioner Patton. I was not seconding the motion, but I was just seeking clarification on it.
Okay, go ahead and then, yes, go ahead.
Okay, I believe Commissioner Thompson said deny the petition. And I just wanted to clarify that whether it was to deny the motion before us.
Yes, I didn't phrase that properly, but yes, I move to deny the motion.
Okay. It seems like Commissioner Dominguez has already seconded, so I will stand down.
Commissioner Dominguez, do you still concur with that? Was that the intent of your motion, of your second?
Yes, the second was specific to the motion to vacate orders issued under disqualification.
Pam, just to confirm, would you please repeat the motion?
I believe Commissioner Thompson made the motion to deny the motion and reaffirm previous decisions.
Does that suffice, Councilor Sanchez, in its clarity?
Yes, it does, but let me just state for the record, so there is no ambiguity. The reference in the motion on the floor is to the motion by petitioners concerned citizens for nuclear safety in honor our Pueblo existence to vacate orders issued under disqualification entered of record or received by the commission on November the 4th, 2022.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor. Pam, would you please provide a roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Brankard, how do you vote?
I vote yes, under the assumption that reaffirming the orders mean reaffirming all three orders that were listed in the original motion.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Candelaria, how do you vote?
No.
Commissioner Chacon?
Yes.
Commissioner Dominguez?
Yes.
Commissioner Fry?
I'm hesitating because I see Council Sanchez's hand is up and I feel like there's so much discussion going on. I am not comfortable voting until I know exactly what we're voting on.
Vice Chair Cipher, would you like me to continue or?
I'd like Councilor Sanchez to make his statement and then we'll continue.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm uncomfortable with Commissioner Brankard's reference to the assumption that the motion also includes ratifying the previous orders. My preference would be that if that is the intent of the commission, that either a separate motion be made subsequent to this one if it carries, or that the present motion, the one on the floor, be amended to explicitly state that the motion is being denied and the three previous orders issued by the commission are being ratified.
So Councilor Sanchez, due to the confusion, if we're to suspend this vote and then ask for this friendly amendment to be of Mr. Thompson's to be, or rather of oh gosh, excuse me, I'll try this again. Commissioner Brankard's friendly amendment be added to Mr. Dominguez's second and Mr. Thompson's motion, that we could just start the vote over? Is that the way to do it or not?
With all due regard for Commissioner Brankard's phrasing, it wasn't so much a friendly amendment as him saying that it was with the assumption that the previous orders were being affirmed. I'd rather have that stated explicitly, whether the previous motion, I think it's still on the floor and the vote hasn't been taken, can either be withdrawn or amended to state whatever the intent of the commission is explicitly.
Okay. Commissioner Dominguez?
With all due respect, we've had a motion, a second. We were already partway through a vote. I think that has to be completed. To stop the process partway through completely goes against all due process with a motion and a second, and it's already on the floor.
Thank you. Commissioner Thompson, did you have something?
No, I think Commissioner Dominguez is probably correct. We probably should proceed with the vote.
Okay. Pam, please proceed with the vote. Councillor Sanchez, if after this, your opinion is still that we probably need another motion, we can discuss that. So Pam, please proceed.
Commissioner McWilliams, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Patton?
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Velasquez?
No.
Commissioner Vihil?
Yes.
Commissioner Zemlik?
Yes.
Commissioner Fry?
I'll abstain.
Vice Chair Cipher?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Do you think, Councillor Sanchez, in your opinion, that there should be another clarifying motion, or do you think this one was clear enough? I know we had an individual question.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. First, let me apologize to Commissioner Dominguez. I, in fact, did misstate the procedural posture of the motion, and I take his correction wholeheartedly. Yes, I am uncomfortable with the use of the word that the motion assumes that the previous orders are being reaffirmed or ratified. If that's the intent of the commission, I would prefer a separate motion to that effect.
Commissioner Branker?
Well, as I understood the motion that Commissioner Thompson made, he explicitly said reaffirm prior orders. I just wanted to say that that meant those three orders.
Okay. Commissioner Vihil, did you have a statement?
No, I'm sorry. I was trying.
Okay. Okay, we spent a lot of time on this, and a lot of this has been a complex situation, especially for a newbie at the helm. And I apologize for my confusion. I may have interjected here, but in the light of clarity, or in providing clarity, would someone like to make a motion that is crystal clear in regards to the three orders?
Vice Chair Cipher,
Yes.
if I may, before we went to a vote, you asked the commission administrator to
read it back,
restate
didn't
the
I?
motion, which she did.
Yeah.
And then had there been questions by commissioners, that was a point while it was still open before going to a vote.
Very
So
good.
I think Pam restated Commissioner Thompson's motion.
I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you for that reminder. Well, if there's no other motions, let's move forward. We're on item 10 of the agenda. Review of permit required determination, appealing New Mexico Energy Minerals and Natural Resources Department's Oil Conservation Division Director's determination stated in October 3rd, 2022 notice of 20.6.2 NMAC compliance requirements. Mr. Rose.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, this is Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
We left item 9 before I had a chance to ask a question. So we've still got the second issue, which is about the stay on the discharge permit. And I would like to see if we could get some clarification on how and when we might be in a position to deal with that. So the EAB action remanded it to EPA, to Region 6, I believe. And are we going to wait for Region 6 to completely go through the process, the public opinion process, and then issue a permit before we come back and revisit this? Or are we prepared to take some type of action before then?
Do we have a hearing we want to set up on that so that we can deliberate and get information, or do we need any more information? What's the wish of the commission? Do they want more information?
One of the issues that's uncertain, that introduces uncertainty to me, is the reason we, as I recall, the reason that we did the stay was because there was some question as to whether this facility was a hazardous waste facility or a water treatment facility under the Clean Water Act. I have read the EAB decision. It's long and convoluted, and it seems to me that the EAB did not rule on that question, whether it's a hazardous waste treatment facility or a wastewater treatment facility. The decision was primarily based on the public participation process, and that the fact that data was provided and considered after the public participation opportunities had been eliminated. So I would suggest that the question of and I'm having a hard time with my words here, but it seems to me that the EAB was comfortable with the idea that the discharge was regulated under the Clean Water Act, not the Hazardous Waste Act. So there's a couple of different issues going on there, and I'd like to request or like to know if any of the people that have reviewed this in more detail than I have thoughts about whether we need to continue with the stay.
Okay. So for the record, we're going back to item number 9, and we're going to revisit the second part of the question, which is, now that we've affirmed the 3 prior orders, do we affirm the stay? Am I properly stating that? Okay. Commissioner Bankert?
Oh, it seemed initially when this order came out that there was some implication that the stay had sort of automatically been lifted because we had an order.
Right.
But from what I've heard today from Council Sanchez is that he doesn't think so. And so perhaps what we need, is, if that's the position of council, then, one or more of the parties are free to file a motion to lift the stay based on this EAB order.
Commissioner Dominguez?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. Just like everybody else, including all the parties, I would love for things to proceed forward and clean up uncertainty. However, from a transparency standpoint with the general public, we had a limited agenda item before the commission. There is nothing on today's agenda regarding the stay and making a decision on that stay. And I'm sure if we made a decision, somebody will file an appeal on that because it wasn't a listed agenda item for today's meeting. So I think our hands are somewhat tied. Plus, I don't know that all of the information that's being discussed has been provided to all the commission members for actual review to discuss and make a decision on. So I don't mean to bog the process down, but there's a specific process that the commission has to follow regarding listing agenda items prior to a meeting and not getting too far off course there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Sanchez, when we first talked about this a week or two ago, we were talking about the stay, whether it had effectively had been lifted at the time we thought it had. Now we're saying, well, not really. I guess technically the stay is still in effect. It's what the commission voted on and what is there. Is that not true?
Well, notwithstanding my apparent confusion as to the substance of the motion, the commission has ratified its previous orders staying this proceeding. So yes, that would be true. And to Commissioner Dominguez's point, I think that a discussion or decision even, or especially regarding the effect of the stay and how the commission might next proceed is beyond the scope of agenda item 9. And I think it's correct that even though discussion might be appropriate, I think it should take place at another time and as a separate agenda item, or potentially the hearing officer can meet with counsel and discuss the effect of any of the remand on the current proceeding, and then they can come back to the commission with some idea of how they prefer to proceed. But for now, again, my misapprehension of the substance of the motion, the orders have been stayed. The orders have been reaffirmed that have the effect of staying the proceeding.
Commissioner Thompson, the discussion that has followed your initial inquiries, does what would be your desire in moving forward in light of the information?
I think this needs to be considered at a future meeting. I certainly appreciate Commissioner Dominguez's observations, and I was not asking actually to act on the stay, but I wanted to bring it up and I think consideration at a future meeting, perhaps with discussions with the hearing officer would be beneficial as well.
I'd like that as well. Thank you. Commissioner Banker, you're still showing up on the screen. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, this is perfectly fine. And when I was referring to a motion to lift the stay, I meant that coming from the parties, and we would consider it a future meeting.
I see. Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that was good additional discussion. That helped clear it up in my mind as well. So with that, we will now move to item 10 on the agenda. And what I'd like to do, Pam, if you just make note for the next agenda, that's probably something we're going to need to discuss about getting on the agenda.
I'll make a note of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I've already read the introduction of 10. And is Lewis Rose here? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Great. Would you like?
I don't know if you can hear me. I can only hear you intermittently.
Yes. How's this? Yes, go ahead. Please proceed.
Yeah, if you would, Mr. Vice Chair, basically there are separate appeals here based on behalf of a number of companies rather than get into the substance of the appeal. Appeals, I note, and given your last discussion, somewhat afraid to raise it, but the parties in this case, the Oil Conservation Division and the petitioners have all agreed to a stay pending discussion on potential settlement. So that's the only issue I think before you. We've got, just to give you some further background, the parties are meeting.
Okay. I'm sorry, you either cut out or your last words, the parties are meeting. Mr. Rose? Pam, are you able to hear Mr. Rose?
I'm not able to hear him, but I am texting with him. He's having the same audio issues we've been having intermittently this morning. I just let him know that we could not hear him.
Okay. Okay, well, let me ask this question. I don't know if any of the other petitioners are here today. I see Jesse Tremaine.
Good morning, Vice Chair.
Represent, sir?
I represent the Oil Conservation Division. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Oh, wonderful. One of the basic questions I had was, what are you asking the WQCC to review? And is this rulemaking by the Oil Conservation Director? And if so, what authority does WQCC have to review his rulemaking? Are you the right person to ask those questions to?
Well, I think, Mr. Vice Chair, that gets to the potential substance of the argument. And the Oil Conservation Division's position is very much so that this is not a rulemaking in any capacity.
Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound.
I'm pausing in my response for, and I concur with Mr. Rose that the discrete issue before the WQCC this morning is the joint motion to stay. I think that I would be the appropriate person to represent the division in this argument and discussion, but we would ask for any discussion on the merits to be set for another conference.
Okay. And
I think my apologies.
No, go ahead, please.
I think what Mr. Rose was intending to say before he cut out was that the parties' scheduled meetings to discuss settlement of this matter is imminent, and those meetings are taking place over the next approximately 7 to 10 days. So I would hope and expect to see some potential movement on that. And I think discussion on the merits and the legal arguments is premature at this point.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Dominguez?
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. I guess I'll proceed with comment and question, even though counsel for the party still hasn't been able to rejoin, which is not ideal. But you know, obviously, I too have questions about the merits of the situation also, but that's not before us today. The only thing before us today is a stay. And so I think that's all we can delve into. The question I had regarding the stay, and if I read it correctly, there was a time limitation on the stay, and that was to February 10th, and correct me if I'm off on that one. So my question for oil conservation as well as for Mr. Rose is, if the commission approves that stay and we reach that time point, what occurs at that time point other than, I'm assuming, the stay goes away?
Is your question to Mr. Tremaine?
I guess so, because he's the only one we've got left here.
Yes.
Mr. Commissioner, I will endeavor to answer since by default. I believe that procedurally this matter would then be set for hearing. I think procedurally it would be appropriate to set this for a status conference shortly after that date, but I have not, to be candid, I have not discussed what that next date would look like in detail with Mr. Rose. He may have discussed that with my counterpart, Mr. Ames, but unfortunately I wasn't, we did not discuss what that next date would look like specifically.
Okay, and that was somewhat to where I was headed is, and just for clarification, this commission typically does not meet during the legislative session. So if the February 10th deadline, if that's what's stated in the stay, occurs, this commission has not yet actually, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the commission has not actually accepted the petitions for review and scheduled a hearing. That would still have to occur. So given the forthcoming months of events, unless there's a settlement, the commission would take that up at April meeting, regular meeting of WQCC. My concern was if there was not a settlement, the stay was lifted early February, are there going to hit some time stipulations that we're in violation of by not scheduling or start the scheduling process to hear the petitions?
Councilor Sanchez, with Commissioner Dominguez's point and concern here, what's come to my mind is a stay actually the action that would be needed? If this simply doesn't go onto our docket until April, and this may be kind of what Commissioner Dominguez was referring to, is there even an issue in that case?
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. I think Commissioner Dominguez is correct. The typical process in a petition for review is it comes before the commission accepts the petition, appoints a hearing officer, and then we deal with the scheduling subsequent to that. Here, the petition is still pending. The commission has not accepted the petition. So in a sense, there is no proceeding to stay because until the commission accepts the petition, there is no proceeding to stay. My underlying concern, and I know that I've beat the jurisdictional horse to the ground earlier, but if you look at this petition and compare it to what usually comes before the commission, we typically have a petition for review from action by NMED, the issuance of a compliance order, something of that sort. This is an anomaly, if you will, because we don't have any permitting action by NMED in this instance. What we have is an appeal by these gas and utility companies for a compliance order that, I'm sorry, to a letter that was the October 3rd, 2022 notice from the Oil and Conservation Commission director. In my mind, and I heard counsel for Emner speak to this differently, but in my mind, it fits squarely within the definition of a rule under the State Rules Act, in the sense that it's action affecting parties other than the Oil Conservation Commission. It affects, obviously, these 9 gas and utility operators. So that, again, it's anomalous. You'll notice that NMED hasn't entered an appearance in this proceeding because there was no permitting action by them. So I have that, and I'm sorry that I think I've beat the jurisdictional horse to the ground here, but I don't know whether it's even appropriate for this matter to be coming before the commission. And if it is, if the commission determines that it is, then I think Commissioner Dominguez is correct that the first process would be to accept the petition and appoint a hearing officer.
Commissioner Brankard.
Well, the Water Quality Act says that you can appeal a permitting action by a constituent agency. The Environment Department is simply one constituent agency. The Oil Conservation Division is another constituent agency and has, under delegation of authority from this commission, the authority to issue discharge permits under the Water Quality Act. I haven't gone into the details of these cases, but it appears that the Oil Conservation Division has made a decision that these particular entities are required to submit discharge permits. And those parties are contesting whether they should be required to submit discharge permit applications. So arguably, that's a permitting action by a constituent agency under the Water Quality Act. And that's what you file a petition for review on. So I don't think this is that anomalous, other than the fact that this commission rarely sees any permitting actions coming up from the Oil Conservation Division. They almost always only see permitting actions coming from the Environment Department.
I think that's exactly what's the anomaly.
Yeah, so this commission decades ago divided the universe of water quality between the Environment Department and the Oil Conservation Division. and gave each of those two constituent agencies authority to issue discharge permits under specific areas. And
So as you
that's-
understand it, Commissioner Brankard, the request for a stay is a stay the right term? And if so, how does it apply? They're in the middle of negotiations. There's not an actual petition that we received yet, correct?
No, and there's a petition for review of a permitting action submitted by each of these 9, I believe, entities, 9 separate actions, 9 separate decisions by the Oil Conservation Division that are
So
being
when we
appealed.
say petition, as we've been referring it to, we were referring to it, thinking of it as a petition from from the Department of Environment.
No,
Is
this
that
is a
what you were
petition
saying?
from potential permittees,
Okay,
right? Who are
Okay, is that-
disputing whether they should even be permittees.
right. So Councilor or Commissioner Dominguez, to follow up on what you were saying, was that your intent? Am I
Yes.
misunderstanding you?
Correct. There's, as Commissioner Brankard has alluded to, there's 2 different things technically before us. The commission has received, what, 8, 9 petitions for review.
Yes.
And then council, for all those parties, on behalf of those 9 parties, jointly with OCD, has filed a motion for stay. So there's 2 different things. What we're dealing with today is the motion for stay. My point that I started with, and what I'm still grappling with, is since that joint motion for stay had a ending date on it, is what happens at that point in time. Because these were filed as petitions for review of permit, and this is where possibly Commissioner Brankard and I may have different viewpoints. There is not a permit at this point in time.
So how do you
So
review
I
it?
am trying to figure out where to fit this into the commission's adjudicatory rule. If we handle it as a permit review, there are timelines that trigger once the commission receives the petitions, which, if I'm not mistaken, it's an action has to be taken within 90 days. And we're not going to meet those unless there's another approach other than the adjudicatory procedures rule. We're not going to meet our requirements as a commission unless the parties waive that 90-day requirement. So there's a whole slew of question marks hanging out on this thing. I agree with Commission Counsel Sanchez that this is a bit of an anomaly, because I'm having trouble fitting it under 20.1.316 because there is not a permit at this point in time. All that's occurred is OCD has told these parties they need a discharge permit.
But back to
Are
your
you
point
gonna-
that you made in item number 9, the petition before us today is simply a stay. No matter if we missed the boat on timeline for any of these other things, today we're just talking about the stay. Do you
Correct.
concur? You concur with that, right?
That is correct. All we're dealing with is a stay. Where
And
my line of questioning went was the two parties in their joint motion have an endpoint to the stay, which is early February. My question was strictly what happens when that timeline hits, and if there hasn't been a settlement, then it's back in the lap of the commission, and the commission will not meet till April.
right. So is it meaningful for us to give a February stay? And if not, what happens if we give them a stay until April when we're meeting? Then what happens?
Mr. Vice Chair, can you hear me?
Is that Councilor Rose?
It is, and let me point out, just I don't want to complicate things, but under your rules, until a hearing officer is appointed, the chair serves as hearing officer and has all the authority that the hearing officer does. So even if the stay expires in February, either an extension of the stay or further proceedings would be up to the hearing officer. In this case, until you appoint one, it would be the chair. So I think the commission has authority to act even during the session, but it would be through the hearing officer, not through the full commission. And so,
unfortunately, we're saddled with a lame chair at the moment who's hopping along depending on the expertise of all these sage people. But I'm very willing to try and to act. But really, without the permits, as pointed out, I'm not even clear on what we're staying. But Councilor Sanchez, what do you see as moving forward? What we can do? What would be the result of staying this until we meet again? And do I have authority, if I'm acting hearing officer, do I have authority to appoint a hearing officer without commission action? No, I do not. Okay.
No, Vice Chair Cipher, I recognize and I take well Commissioner Brankert's comments about it being a different constituent agency, but I likewise agree with Commissioner Dominguez that regardless who the constituent agency is here, there is no permitting action per se before the commission. So I'm not sure what the commission would be reviewing other than the decision of the Oil Conservation Commission to generally require oil and gas utility companies to obtain discharge permits.
Well,
but that aside, again, I think the reason the commission is stumbling with this is because the usual practice is to decide initially whether or not to accept the petition for review. That's what triggers an actual proceeding. Until there's an acceptance of the pending petitions, the 9 of them, in my view, and I may be incorrect, there is no proceeding to stay. So I think what needs to happen, if the commission believes this is an appropriate permitting action under the Water Quality Act, for the commission to accept those petitions, you can certainly defer appointment of the hearing officer and then have the parties waive the 90-day requirement so we don't run afoul of that time limitation. And Mr. Rose is correct in saying that absent the appointment of a hearing officer as such, you as the acting chair have authority to rule on procedural motions that do not dispose of the matters on the merits.
Okay, well, let me get back to you, but I want, Commissioner Fry has had her hand up for a while. Let me get her point first, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Chair. Council Sanchez answered a lot of what I was thinking about. I'm wondering if we go with the petition to review. Does that review take into account what our jurisdiction is as a commission?
Councilor Sanchez? Did you get her
Commissioner
question?
Fry, I think Commissioner Fry, if there's a genuine question among the commissioners as to whether there is a permitting action that is subject to review under the Water Quality Act, then we can get around that by simply providing, if the petition is going to be accepted, it can be accepted provisionally, preserving the jurisdictional question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dominguez, is it clear to you what stay is being asked for? More specifically, we're going to stay what? If we act today to enact this stay, what is your understanding of what is being asked to stay?
Sorry for the delay there. I'm working off of one screen and I was actually reading the joint motion of stay. So, and I may need to go back to it, and I'll ask for either of the parties to chime in on this, but my quick read on the joint motion for stay, it was a motion for stay and tolling of deadlines, which may address part of my questions as far as the deadlines.
Okay.
But the stay is for all proceedings.
Doesn't that give us the extensions we were asking for if we do a stay?
Vice Chair, I had a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry, I kind of interrupt you. Sometimes there's a delay. But I'm saying, doesn't that address the very issue we were talking about, not being able to meet these deadlines? That's we can place our own deadline on the stay if we acted. Is that true? Or could we not do that unilaterally?
That's really a good question. And the fact that they've asked for a stay of the proceedings and a toll on the deadlines, I think it addresses part of the deadline issue, with the exception that if that stay goes away, and that's where my question is. The way I'm reading the joint motion from the parties is they're asking for a stay of the proceedings, which would, in my opinion, include actually accepting the petitions for review. And so I think we could move forward with just the motion for the stay and the tolling of the deadlines.
Would you say, Larry, that if we did that, we wouldn't have, even though they requested a February deadline, we wouldn't have to give a February deadline? Just leave it as an open stay?
I don't think that's an option before us. We have a motion that's been filed. It's not up to us to change the language within the motion.
Okay, very good. Councilor Sanchez?
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. I'm looking at the stipulated motion of state proceedings that was filed on behalf of Trans Colorado. That's 2252. And I assume that all the other stipulated motions mirror this one. Notwithstanding the style of the motion, it reads, it requests an order staying the proceedings and tolling only this, the deadline for Trans Colorado to submit a discharge permit application. So that certainly is an acknowledgement that we don't have a discharge permit that's been issued by OCD. But that aside, it wouldn't seem to address the 90-day limit under our rule for adjudicatory rules.
Well, what's good for me is that was my original question. What is it they're asking for? And specifically, if what they're asking for is that's their deadline. So if we do a stay and it's just a stay until they provide their permit, and then that date is February 10, how are we exposed?
Mr. Vice Chair, you hear me?
Yes, is this Mr. Rose?
It is. Just, I want to clarify one thing, and that is, in terms of this appeal, I think we pointed out in our petition, your rules, the groundwater rules actually, 20.6.2.3112B grants authority with the secretary, in this case, meaning the OCD director, determines that a discharge is not exempt, then the party can appeal that to the commission within 30 days, which is what we've done here. And so the permitting action is the requirement to.
Mr. Rose cut out again. Dang, I was starting to. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for Mr. Rose to return, Krista, Commissioner McWilliams, you have something for us?
I was going to ask for the petitioner's counsel to be able to bring clarity on what it is they were asking for, and I think he was attempting to.
That's right where he was headed.
Yep.
he was almost there. Yes. Mr. Councilor Tremaine, can you read minds? Would you like to try to guess where he was going?
I'm reluctant to speak for council, but I believe that he was making the representation along the lines represented by Commissioner Brankard that or suggested by Commissioner Brankard that the OCD has issued notices to operators, some specifically in letters and through a guidance that certain types of facilities require a discharge permit and requiring those discharge permits to be submitted by specific deadlines. Petitioners contest that under various reasons, which I'm reluctant to get into, particularly if Mr. Rose cannot hear. They contest under various bases that the OCD can do that. And we are currently about to take part in discussions with them that with the various petitioners that the division believes will potentially resolve some of the issues, potentially all, and in other cases may limit the scope of the dispute, which this commission, if it chooses to hear it, would necessarily have to hear. So all we are asking for at this point in time is this case, the various petitions filed by petitioners do not move forward until after February 10th.
Okay. So, Councilor Sanchez, after listening to what I've heard today, I think if I'm understanding this correctly, there's no downside and there's nothing unrepairable we couldn't do if we were to accept this stay until February 10th. Is there some counsel you want to give us or a negative downside to that we should put the brakes on and not do that?
Vice Chair Cipher, listening to what Commissioner Dominguez said, which is, if I understood him correctly, he's saying that the stipulated motion to stay proceedings includes or embraces also the commission's consideration of the petition itself. I'm not sure I understand how we do that, but if that's the reading of the commission, that it stays the question of whether the commission will accept the petition or not, then I don't know that we have any deadlines that we would run afoul of if the petition itself hasn't been accepted.
Okay. And Commissioner Dominguez and Commissioner Bankard, can you weigh in on your thoughts on that same question?
Well, I hate to open a huge can of worms here, but I'm utterly baffled by the concept of the commission accepting a petition. All the deadlines that are in the commission's rules and are in the Water Quality Act focus on the commission simply receiving a petition, that you have to take action within 90 days after receipt of the petition. There's nothing in there about accepting a petition and any deadlines flowing from accepting a petition. I mean, once you've got the petition, you've got to act unless there is the parties waive that 90-day deadline. Or in this case, file a motion to stay, which is sort of attempting to waive the 90-day deadline, or at least put off all the other deadlines in 20.1.3.16.
Okay, so we've been asked to give them a stay until February 10. What do you think, Commissioner Dominguez? Any comments?
Yeah, my comment is this makes my head hurt. I'm a little bit
I
like,
wish I would have been better prepared on this one, but I thought I'd understood it, and I'm out in left field right now. So
and I'm a little bit like Commissioner Brankert. I'm getting too old for this. So I'm still a little bit confused as to whether there's a deadline or not. That the commission would be under, because the permit review process listed under 20.1.3.16. One of the early things, if the commission was to accept the petition, is the department is supposed to immediately file the administrative record. Well, there is no administrative record because there is no permit. So the rules, irregardless of what Mr. Rose said, that under the Act, there's the opportunity for a party to appeal a permitting action, but the commission's adjudicatory rules are somewhat not prepared for this particular situation. So I don't know where that fits as far as a deadline. I think the commission would be fine with approving the joint motion for stay. And then in the meantime, potentially with the assistance of counsel, we can sort of figure out what the next steps would be, but also keep our fingers crossed that the parties involved do come to some
Settlement.
sort of settlement or agreement during that time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the best that we can do today. But I'll leave it at that because I see that Commissioner Fry's got.
Yes, I'm
her
hoping
hands
you
up.
can give us some light. Commissioner Fry?
Well, I have just more questions. So if the commission votes on the stay and approves it, then what is the next step? If the parties come back, do they have to resubmit the petition? So there's time in there? No?
Well, I'm thinking that we don't see the downside of granting the stay to February. There's nothing negative that comes of that, and it allows legal counsel to do some research. I think that's what I got out of what Commissioner Dominguez says. Did I put words in your mouth, Larry?
Actually, I would, at this point in time, I hope somebody would put words in my mouth. So I think you're sort of on track, and I'm still, for being such a simple motion, I've had to read it over and over. Actually, the February 10th deadline doesn't put a constraint on the commission, it puts a constraint on the parties to file, to hit their deadline to file a discharge permit. The latter, the very last sentence of the motion says, at the request of either party, the hearing officer may lift the stay. So this is back to one of your original points. The way that reads, this stay will remain in place until either party, either or both parties ask for the stay to be lifted. And if the commission has not met by then, the hearing officer, i.e. the
chair,
default chair, can sign that order.
I see.
And it just puts the rest of the process back into.
Okay. Well, I don't see the downside to that. And I think rather than deny the stay, I think it's the best of choices we have. Commissioner Bankard, can you give us your 2 cents on this line of thought?
Well, many a legal case is won or lost by misplaced commas. And this seems like
Thank
one
you
of
for
those.
that.
If the comma had been after the word proceeding instead of after the word OCD, then it would be clear that tolling the deadline to submit the discharge permit application is the only thing to which the February 10th applied. And instead, as Commissioner Dominguez points out, it could be that the stay goes on indefinitely.
Okay.
But they put the commas in the wrong place. So it looks like the February 10th applies to both of those things.
Well, Commission, I guess what
But
are
we can make it apply however we want.
Yeah.
What
are
we
our
want to grant an
choices?
indefinite stay, we can grant an indefinite stay.
Yeah. Yes.
Vice Chair Cipher, let me make one upfront comment and then maybe we'll just try to move this thing forward. The first thing I want to make clear for the record is I think it is completely unfair for the parties involved that due to whatever technical difficulties, everybody involved has not been with us the entire time, and I don't know if they've made it back. It's not fair to the commission. It's not fair to the parties. And however great old technology is, not just the current agenda item that we're on, but the prior one also, is technology is not at a point that you can conduct legal proceedings telephonically without a total waste of time and resources. That's just my personal opinion there. I think until the commission gets back to holding formal proceedings in an in-person deal, we keep running up against these technology challenges that are only going to create a quick method for appeal. With that said, I would make a motion that we accept the stipulated motion to stay proceedings and hold a deadline regarding WQCC 22-52 through -60, and that motion for stay in place until either party requests of the hearing officer that the stay be lifted.
I second that motion.
We have a first and second. Largely, the commission, we've not heard from a lot of different people. I want to, because of this anomaly, if you will, I really want to hear from members of the commission. If you want to weigh in on some issue, please do not remain silent. And if I don't hear from anybody in the next 10 seconds, we'll go ahead and ask Pam to call for the vote. Okay, I guess what that means is everybody has been as confused as the rest of us, and we've got a few good ideas here, and I think what we've chosen here is a good step. I think it's a positive way to try to meet this, given the information we have.
Mr. Hearing Officer, this is Commissioner
Yes.
Thompson.
Great.
My mind has been wandering a bit. The stipulated motion mentions an action by the hearing officer. Has the hearing officer been approved or appointed?
Commissioner Dominguez?
The answer to that is no, because we have not even accepted the petitions at this point. However, the statute and regulations provide for, if there has not been a hearing officer appointed, the chair of the commission shall preside as hearing officer on a matter up until the point in time that a hearing officer is assigned. So the short answer to that is Vice Chair Cipher technically serves as the hearing officer during that interim period. Did that adequately answer your question, Commissioner Thompson?
Okay. Commissioner Thompson, did you hear that response?
Yes, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Commissioner Fry, did you have something to comment on?
No, I was just preparing to vote.
Okay. And Counselor Sanchez, did you have a final comment?
Yes, but I think I guess it's implicit from Commissioner Dominguez's motion, essentially granting or accepting, but I guess granting is the correct word, the stipulated motion for all 9 pending petitions. I would encourage the commission or council by stipulation to agree to a consolidation of all 9 cases. That way we don't have to be issuing multiple orders or anything of that sort. My understanding is that except for the petitioners, each of the 9 petitions are mirror images of each other.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. One last question I have, Counselor Sanchez, is if I were appointed, if I by default am the hearing officer, what about including in this motion the authority for me to appoint a hearing officer if the need arise? Because we're not meeting until April, and if there's some technicality you discover as you dive into this, that would be a nice authority to have from this commission. I know we've made similar motions in the past.
Yeah,
Commissioner
Vice Chair Cipher,
yes.
In those instances, it was the order, notwithstanding Commissioner Brankard's comment, it was the order granting the petition and appointing a hearing officer, or allowing the chair to appoint a hearing officer. We, as I understand what has been discussed, are not acting on the petition as such, whether it's been received or accepted. So no, that wouldn't be the case.
Okay, so there's up to a 60-day timeline delay in the event that there needs to be action initiated by the hearing officer.
The short answer to your question is until a hearing officer is appointed, you're on the hook for any matters that come before the commission, unless that are procedural in nature. In nature.
All right, very good. Commissioner Dominguez, did you have something you wanted to add? Okay, with that, let's call for the vote. Pam?
Yes, sir. Can I confirm who made the second, please?
It was, yeah, I think.
Was it you, Commissioner Brankard?
Yes, I think it
Okay.
was.
Okay, thank you. Having that, Commissioner Brankard, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Candelaria?
Yes.
Commissioner Chacon?
Yes.
Commissioner Dominguez?
Yes.
Commissioner Fry?
Yes.
Commissioner McWilliams?
Yes.
Commissioner Patton? Commissioner Patton? Okay. Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Commissioner Velasquez? Commissioner Velasquez, how do you vote? Commissioner Vihil?
Yes.
Commissioner Zemlik?
Yes.
Vice Chair Cipher?
Yes.
Let me circle back around. Commissioner Velasquez, your vote? Okay, the vote is complete and Vice Chair Cipher, the motion passes.
Okay, very good. Let us move to item 11. There is no meeting and expected upcoming matters that I know about other than no February or March meetings. Our next meeting will be in April. Any corrections or additions to that? Commissioner Dominguez?
Thank you, Vice Chair Cipher. Regarding April, and this is more of just a question for the commission administrator as to whether we have any items already docketed for April.
We don't have anything docketed for April other than what we have discussed putting on the April agenda today.
Do we have, it seems like we have a lot of stuff with some of the prior things floating in the air. With some of the other cases, are some of those likely to resurface sometime around April?
There was
Actually-
one on the Cannon Air Force Base issue, was there not?
Yes, there was Canon, and I'm looking back at my list, and we also have WQCC 22-42, and that's the City of Gallup matter.
Okay. So 3 matters on the docket so far.
Yes.
Okay.
Potentially, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, hearing nothing else. Commissioner Blackard, your face is still showing on the screen. Does that mean you had something you wanted to input?
I think I'm stating the obvious, but obviously if anything comes up with litigation involving the commission, I'm assuming that between now and then, April, we'll hear from our counsel.
Yes, that was what she told us. So. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's schooling me. It was a good education for me, and I appreciate all the sage wisdom out there. I will do this at least one more time in April, and hopefully we've got some other takers for the chair. Have a good day. See you in April.
Thank you.